Good morning. Call this meeting to order. It's a meeting of the Montana Board of Public Education. Today is Friday, November 22nd, and we are meeting in the Bozeman Schools Administrative Building located at 404 West Main Wilson School Boardroom. And we will begin today with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Chris, will you please call the roll? Here. Excused in transit.
Here.
Here, and very excited to see Dr. Tharp wearing Pioneer Blue for Miles Community College.
Hey.
Here. Dave Hammond.
Present.
Adam Powell.
He is excused.
Renee Rasmussen.
She's going to try to get on later. And Susie is online. Good morning, Susie.
Good morning.
The Montana Board of Public Education encourages the public to participate in board discussions. Persons who wish to participate should sign the public comment sign-in sheet and identify themselves to the board chair or executive director prior to the board's consideration of the matter in which the persons are concerned. Anyone wishing to participate in board discussions will be recognized by the chair in keeping with normal board parliamentary procedure. We discourage public comment on personnel matters and ask that you discuss these issues in private with the board chair. Montana Board of Public Education is a professional development unit provider. Attending a Board of Public Ed meeting may qualify you to receive professional development units. Please complete the necessary information on the sign-in sheets if you are applying for professional development units. At this time, we'd like to welcome any visitors joining us. Any visitors in person or online would like to introduce themselves? Seeing none, as we just talked about public participation, I just want to share a card that I received yesterday. This says, "Dear BPE members, thank you so much for taking the time to visit MSU and particularly the Department of Education. We have a lot of great programs brewing in addition to our established programs, and we appreciate your commitment to listening. Thank you for all you do to support students." And that was signed by Dr. Marcy Ruhr, and she's the Director of Outreach and Engagement. She's one of the ladies we met yesterday, so I would share that with everybody. Right. Vice Chair Hedlund, would you like to take these three items as License Committee Chair?
Yes,
Or-
Mr. Chairman, I will.
Okay, go ahead. Item number 20.
Okay, so we are going to, sorry, one second. We are going to go to item number 20 and take action on the site visit and state exit report of Salish Kootenai College educator preparation provider in the Division of Education. And I will turn it over to Crystal to give us the update.
Good morning and happy Friday, Chair Tharp, Vice Chair Hedlund, and members of the board. My name is Crystal Andrews, ANDREWS for the record. I am the Accreditation and Licensure Senior Manager at the Office of Public Instruction. In September, Michelle Price and I shared the state exit report of the Division of Education at Salish Kootenai College, and you heard from the faculty at SKC about the process. Today, I'm here to seek action for the approval of the state exit report and the status of regular accreditation for Salish Kootenai College. We are on page 344 in your packet. You will find the state exit program report that was shared with you in September. The site review was conducted by the Montana Office of Public Instruction. Prior to the on-site visit, a group of qualified educators, including teachers, college professors, administrators, and content specialists reviewed the institutional reports that the EPP meets for the requirements of the Montana Professional Education Preparation Program standards for both unit and program standards. The report provides the results of the review relating to PEPs as outlined in ARM 1058. You will again find the summary of results starting on page 345. Starting with the initial standards, followed by the advanced standards and the teaching program standards. At this time, I'd like to acknowledge and invite the Dean of the Division of Education, Doug Ruman from Salish Kootenai College, to share any further information or any final thoughts about the process with you. And I believe he is there with you today.
Yes, Dean Ruman, please come up. Whichever one you used, make sure you hit the right hand, the right hand button on there and make her turn green. There you are.
Thank you, Director Andrews, Vice Chair and Superintendent-elect Hedlund, and Chair Tharp for the opportunity to speak briefly to you this morning. My name is Douglas Ruman, last name spelled R-U-H-M-A-N for the record. This time last year, the Division of Education at SKC was deeply engaged in a self-study that required us to demonstrate how the work we do to prepare classroom teachers aligns with Montana Professional Educator Preparation Program standards as part of our state accreditation review. And this was a weighty task for our small department at our tribal college. But it was a task we've always taken seriously because we feel that any entity that prepares the next generation of classroom teachers seeking licensure in Montana ought to be held to the highest standards, regardless of its size or its structure. Montana's young learners and their families deserve dynamic, creative, and inspiring teachers who know at a deep level who their students are and how to meld their identity with research-based best practices that help them succeed, not only in school, but in life. As I've said, the work associated with a comprehensive state accreditation review is a big lift. But having to engage in self-study is a critical aspect of continuous improvement. And we have taken numerous insights and feedback from our state review that will make us an even better EPP as we keep moving forward. Training excellent teachers is hard work, and recruiting great teaching candidates has never been more challenging than it is now. But at SKC, we're incredibly fortunate to have amazing candidates who are in it for all the right reasons. Although mainstream education has not always been a friend to Native learners, they come to us anyway because they want to give their future students hope and inspiration to be better and do better for their community. We aspire to keep this vision for the work we do well into the future. Thank you for the work your board does to guide and strengthen teaching and learning in our state, and for allowing me a few minutes to speak with you today. That's all I have.
Thank you, Doug. So with that, the Superintendent of Public Instruction recommends the approval of the state exit report and regular accreditation status of the Division of Education at Salish Kootenai College. I stand for any questions that the board may have. Thank you.
Are there any questions of the board?
Madam Chair, I have a question.
You need to turn your mic on. Your mic's not on.
Yes, Member Quinlan.
Okay. But this is not what I.
Maybe she can. Susie, can you still hear her?
I can't hear too well. You can go ahead, Dr. Tharp, if that's easier.
No one can hear me?
That's better. Yeah, definitely.
That one's not.
Oh my God, it's your seat.
Let's try to go. Okay, I can hear it. Yeah, okay. I just wanted to ask, your
Doug.
last name is?
Ruman.
Ruman, okay. I wanted to know how the K-12 reading specialist program that the board approved last year, I
Mhm.
think, for your added to your program. I wondered how that was going.
Well, it's going very well. Thank you for asking. The first cohort that we had they graduated in the summer of 2023. The second cohort has started now. We had 20 graduate students in the very first cohort. 9 of them, or excuse me, 18. It was 18. And 9 of those students were in the Literacy Excellence and Equity Program, which is the one that leads to the K-12 reading endorsement. Those teachers have graduated and are now serving as school leaders in their districts. The second cohort has 21 in it, in the cohort. And I think you might remember that I described that in our C&I degree that we have, it's broken into two strands. One of them is called Integrative Indigenous Education. And so that strand is mostly about the meaningful integration of language and culture into school curriculum. And then this K-12 reading endorsement is the other strand. And in the newer cohort that we have 21, and I believe the number is 10 in that cohort that are in the reading. They are halfway through their program. In the school year from September to May, well, through June actually, they have weekend intensive sessions, and then there's a 6-week on-campus session, the first summer and the second summer of that program. So the second cohort is in the midst of their work and doing very well. We had 100% graduation. We had 15, I believe, of the 18 in the first cohort were all returnees. In other words, they acquired their bachelor's degrees at SKC and came back for their master's at our college after an average of 5 or 6 to 10 years of teaching. So we felt that was kind of a feather in our cap to have that many returnees.
Thank you. That's great news.
Thank you, Mr. Ruman. Any more questions from the board?
Chair Hedlund, I'd like to ask a question if that's okay.
Yes, please. Member Slinger.
Thank you. So I saw the date of this report is September 12th and 13th. And I saw that there was an area of improvement with the initial quality assurance continuous that you're still working on that. How's that progress going on?
It's going very well. The department chairs in our division are working with their faculty right now to align what we're calling a critical assignments. It's a database that all faculty are able to access, and on specific assignments, all of which are aligned with the PEPs, faculty record student scores into that shared database, and then we are able to sort that information and use it for program assurance, for quality assurance for our program. The department chairs are finishing that work this quarter. We expect to have it fully implemented by the middle of next term.
Are
Madam
there
Chair,
any further questions?
I have a question, Madam Chair.
Member Hammond.
Thank you. I see that 60% of your students are American Indians. What is the makeup of the other 40%, and are they mostly Montanans?
Yes, I believe they're all Montanans.
All Montanans.
And
okay.
our average student demographic breakdown in our division is typically more like 75% and 25% non-Indian. Of course, the federal government defines tribal member or first generation only, and we have quite a few students who are second and third generation students in our program.
Thank you. Are there any further follow-ups? All right, Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Please do.
Okay, I want to thank you, Mr. Ruman, for the dedication and great work, first of all. And then I would like to make a motion for the approval of the state exit report and regular accreditation status of Salish Kootenai College Educator Preparation Program.
For the motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Quinlan. Any other board discussion? Well, Dean Ruman, I too am happy to see success and programs occurring in our smaller campuses across the state, especially with the targeted population that you serve there, and really happy to see this moving forward. If there are no other board questions, is there any public comment? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Thank you so much. Congratulations,
Thank
Dean
you.
Ruman.
Thank you very much.
All right, we are now on item number 21 in page 353 of the packet for a follow-up report on Praxis test scores and hard-to-fill endorsement areas. And I will turn this over to Crystal again.
Thank you, Chair Tharp, Vice Chair Headland, and members of the board. Again, my name is Crystal Andrews, ANDREWS for the record, and I am the Accreditation and Licensure Senior Manager at the Office of Public Instruction. I am here today as a follow-up to the September Board of Public Ed meeting where I presented Praxis passing rates for specific endorsement areas. Excuse me. I was able to dive further into the data and have the pass rates over a 5-year trend for the 5 tests with the lowest scores from last month or the last meeting. In each table, you can see the testing year, along with how many exams were taken, the number of individuals who took the test. In most cases, these numbers are different, which indicates that some of the same individuals took the test multiple times. You will then see the number of individuals who passed, followed by the passing percentage, and finally the national percent passing rates. So some general findings, you'll see the passing percentages have declined in Montana and at the national level. There are less individuals in Montana that are taking the Praxis tests, and the elementary test has the lowest national percentage out of all of the tests. Montana is actually 11% higher for the 23-24 testing year. Because the percentage for the elementary test 5018 has been so low nationwide, I wanted to look into what other options there were for elementary or what other states were using. Through conversations with ETS, I discovered that Montana is only one of 6 states that still use the 5018 test. Most use the 5001 elementary test. The difference between the two is that the 5001 test is broken into subtests, and the 5018 is one test for all content areas. As you can see in the last table in your packet, the national passing percentage is far higher for the subtests than the 5018 test. Without knowing the history behind Montana still using 5018, I brought my findings to the Praxis Working Committee a few weeks back. We had a discussion on the pros and cons of both the tests and ultimately decided to have Christy Steinberg bring up the elementary tests at the Council of Deans meeting this past Tuesday. The council voted unanimously to have the Praxis Working Committee look into the 5001 subtests further as a possibility for Montana's EPPs. I will note that the MSU Bozeman does already utilize the 5001 subtests for their MAT program, so there is some familiarity in the state. I will conclude by offering to continue this conversation in January. I will have 3 tests at that time with recommendation cut scores that need to be revisited for the board to review, and would be happy to have Lisa Cologne-Durham from ETS join us to review the elementary tests in more depth or answer any other questions that the board may have. With that, I stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. I would like to ask if you could tell us which 3 areas you're working on.
So the revisits are social studies, industrial education, and family consumer sciences. And what it is are those 3 tests have been rewritten, they've been updated, and so we need to get the new pass rate or the new pass score because the tests that are current will expire of August, I believe, of 2025. So that's when we will start the new tests.
Thank you. Another one I noticed is art is pretty low. Is that something you took a look at?
I do have the data in the packet on page 381. So the 1, 2, 3, 4th chart or table has the national pass rates and how many exams in Montana have been taken.
Mm-hmm.
So when I say we're revisiting the test, that means that the ETS is is bringing those tests up for revisions, and that's why we needed to have a panel look at them, set the cut score for the new test. So that is done through the ETS, not that we have requested that. I will also share, if I can, Vice Chair Hedlund, that a question that you had at the last board meeting was, how other states are doing, how do we compare, or how do, that was a question. And I did ask ETS, and state data is owned by the state. I could contact states and ask them how they're doing on certain areas, but that's why I provided the national percentages, because that's public knowledge that we can compare with. And so that was why I used that instead of the states.
Thank you, Crystal. I really appreciate you diving into that and working with Christy to take action. Are there any other questions from the board?
Madam Chair.
Member Goodman.
Thank you. I have two questions. The first question is, can you tell us, in terms of the actual administration of the test, how does taking 4 subtests look different than sitting down for one setting? How does all that work?
Yeah, so Chair Tharp, Vice Chair Hedlund, and Board Member Quinlan, I have some more information. I was thinking maybe you'd ask, so I do have it in front of me. It is the biggest difference, and as we talked at the Praxis Working Committee and with the deans, is the length of the tests. So the 5018 is one test, so it's all content areas over one test. The 5001 is broken down by reading, which is 90 minutes and 80 questions, math, which is 65 minutes and 50 questions, social studies, which is 60 minutes and 60 questions, and science, which is 60 minutes and 55 questions. I believe the test is a little more expensive in terms of being broken into sub-tests. However, the benefit that I see, and like I said, Lisa would be happy to share more at the next meeting if you'd like, is that if a person isn't passing, it's typically in one specific area. So say math, that was mine. That was always the struggle for the Praxis. And, if that one area is the only place that, the scores are low, they then can only have to retake that subtest, so that, that math part of the test, rather than having to redo the entire test. I'm not the expert, but from my experience, and it's been way too long to even say when I took the Praxis, is that, if you have to retake a section, you want to focus in on that section and what you need to revisit and what you need to study. If you have to retake the whole test, then you may, not focus on another area and not score as well that second time, because you have the whole test to take again. So I think there are definitely some benefits to having it broken into subtests. Of course, I'm one voice, just mine. Like I said, I've talked with the working committee and the deans, and they're interested. They'd like to look into it further, and so that is what I think we plan to do. But it is interesting, and it's interesting that the percentages for those subtests are so much higher than that test 5018.
Great. Thank you. And Madam Chair, I have a second question. I would have thought that, given that we have new pathways for teachers to get endorsements in the last couple of years, that there would be more people taking Praxis tests. And I know we're not looking at all the tests I guess we are looking at all the tests that are administered. And the number, as you pointed out, is going down, not up. So do you have any comments about that?
I do, Chair Tharp, Vice Chair Hedlund, and Board Member Quinlan. Yes, I agree with you. And as you will see in January for my licensure report, I was hopeful that would take more of a precedence. I can share districts are asking, as I'm working with districts, and I'm not trying to get into emergency auth discussion, that's for the next meeting, but as I'm working with districts on those, I am really sharing alternative pathways. I feel that it's time districts understand what they can be using, that if they have a teacher, I have more than several districts that have a teacher that has, say, an elementary education Montana license, but they really need a family consumer science teacher, small school. So they get an emergency authorization for that person. So I am making sure that when I see that scenario that I share, it's up to the district, of course, on how they want to utilize their teachers, but that teacher, if they'd had 2 years of teaching experience, could take the praxis and get that license. So then they would still get the quality educator payment. That person would be licensed properly. So, it is sort of coaching and helping districts understand. I don't know as if, it's been 2 years now that we've had this enroll, that they've really caught on to it. Some have really thanked us for having these, pathways opened, but I feel like it's really the time where I'm trying to help them understand, the emergency auth is not the only option. And with American Board and different, we have a lot of different things going on in Montana now that, they may not pay close attention to the arms. So that is my job to try to help them and support them with, some of the alternative pathways.
Thank you, and thank you for sharing about the efforts you're making. I know the board appreciates that.
Are there any further questions of the board?
See, Board Member Rasmussen has her hand raised. She's just joined us.
Please excuse me for being a little late. Crystal, how does this coordinate to the number of people applying for licenses or anything like that? I was thinking of graduates. I was thinking of a lot of things because I know that some of the schools at least had been still requiring the praxis anyway. So does this number coordinate to a drop in number of teachers completing a program in state?
Chair Tharp, Vice Chair Hedlund, and Board Member Rasmussen. I would say yes in some ways, and I can share that Michelle Price will be sharing our annual EPP report a couple items from now, which will include some praxis data that was requested by the board. So you'll see a little bit more in just a few minutes. But I do think so. Also, if a EPP doesn't require the praxis anymore, that could be another reason for the decline. Or, even if they do, the applicant can still use content knowledge by grade point average or student teaching portfolio, which a lot of our EPPs are now utilizing. So it is just one of the ways to show that content knowledge. And so that's, I also think, people don't want to take a test if they don't have to take a test. But, it's there, it's an availability, especially like Board Member Quinlan said, to add on an endorsement. It has been something that we tried to open up to get more people licensed in different areas. So I'm hopeful that it'll go up, with that as an option. In terms of adding an endorsement. But right now, I think it's just, if you see the national, it is also going down. So it's just, I can't answer why, but I think it has a lot of things taken into the consideration for that.
Follow up?
Member Rasmussen.
Thank you very much. Crystal, I'm really pleased. I'm really happy to hear that you're helping to coach superintendents. It's something that when I was the president of a Mass region that I found so many didn't understand at that time how to use emergency authorizations. They just never even heard of it. So I think 2 years, we think that it's a long time, with something in law, but for superintendents who are, drinking from a fire hose and coming in new, it's not. So thank you very much for that.
All right, thank you. Are there any follow-up questions from the board? Okay, I really appreciate the report. Thank you so much, Crystal. And I am going to turn it back over to you, Dr. Tharp, and we'll be joining you guys soon in person as you move on to item number 22. I will see you in a bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Hedlund. And so as she transitions, she will join us via the mobile option for Board of Public Ed meetings as she hits the road to come in this way. Next item is item number 22, annual professional educator preparation provider report. And Crystal and Michelle on this one.
Good morning, Chair Tharp and members of the board. My name is Michelle Price, spelled Price for the record. and I am an accreditation specialist at the Office of Public Instruction and am here today with Crystal Andrews. The purpose of this report is to present the State Superintendent of Public Instruction's annual accreditor preparation program report as an information item today. Included in your packet, starting on page 383, is the annual report for the Montana's educator preparation programs as established in ARM 1058-104 and pursuant to 20-4-121 MCA. A few additional items in this year's report are due to requested information in the last BPE meeting and a summary of the state exit reports for areas of improvement across the EPPs. Please note that an area for improvement should be remediated by the next accreditation cycle, and progress toward improvement is reported annually through the annual report to the OPI and BPE. I will provide an overview of each section within the report, starting with the EPP accreditation review schedule. The schedule is on page 386. The EPPs are reviewed every 7 years. Some EPPs were granted a good cause extension, which allowed them additional time for their review. This only impacted their current review, but did not change their future schedules going forward. On the schedule, you will also see the EPPs who are accredited jointly with OPI and CAPE, and the ones who are accredited by the state only. The accreditation status report for each educator preparation program begins on page 387. This area also includes their regional and national accreditation agencies and the initial and expiration dates of their programs. The endorsement areas offered by Montana's EPPs are found on page 408. This area also signifies whether the endorsements are offered as majors, minors, or graduate levels. The data for enrollment and completers can be found on page 410. This information was gathered from the 2022-23 Title II report submitted by the United States Department, or submitted to the United States Department of Education. For the second table, it shows the change in completer totals over 3 fiscal years. The percentage in the right-hand column shows the change between 2 reporting periods. The fiscal year listed in the left column and its previous fiscal year. A data point I wanted to share with you is that's not reflected in the report because the alternative program was recently approved by the BPE in March of 2024, is the number of candidates enrolled in the American Board Certification Program, or ABCTE. Currently, there are 100 Montana candidates enrolled in the American Board. It has reported that 6 candidates have completed the program and that 60 are utilizing a Class 5 provisional license so they can be in a classroom teaching while enrolled. The American Board will be sharing additional information in January that was requested by the board in the March 2024 meeting. On page 411, you will find the key indicators used to measure the effectiveness and impact of completers. The information listed in this area represents a range of tools reported by the EPPs. Many of these mechanisms focus on the candidate's progress to meeting the Montana teaching standards in ARM 1058-501, in task standards, and components of the Danielson framework. As I previously mentioned, the EPPs with areas for improvement reported their progress, and that can be found on page 412. All reported progress is summarized according to the standard. The final area of the report can be found on page 414 and includes the passing rates for the Praxis test, 5018, Elementary Ed Content Knowledge. With the vast number of praxis tests, the decision to focus on 5018 was to be an extension of the previous praxis report from Crystal Andrews. Some information could not be provided for EPPs that had less than 10 test takers during a reported period, and that is signified with an asterisk. When looking at this specific test information, it was noted in the investigation that some of our out-of-state universities that have reported completers to OPI appear to have a decline in their passing rates over the same period of time, and that is reflected within this report. We stand for any questions that the board may have.
Any questions from board members? Dr. McLean.
Thanks so much, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Thanks so much for the great report. So I think I'm referencing page 410, the Title II pieces. So do we have the numbers of those completers who took a job or who are still in Montana? Do we have those percentages of those completers who stay in state and those who have gone out?
I do not have that information. I can definitely write that down and see if we cannot come up with that.
Dr. Mergel is working her way up to the
Yeah,
microphone.
I was gonna say, go ahead. I'll let her speak. She'll probably say what I was gonna say.
Good morning, Chair, board members. Julie Mergel, Chief Program Officer at the Montana Office of Public Instruction. Dr. McLean, I can't give you the exact number, but over the last few years, it's been hovering right around 48% to 50% of the Montana completers in our 10 preparation programs go out of state and do not remain in the state of Montana. But we can get you that exact number. We can include that probably in the licensure report, Crystal. So let's add that to a component so we can show that data and report that to you because we can see those that are not remaining in our state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And just to be clear, I heard 48 to 50%, right? Wow. So, and Mr. Chair, another question. So as I'm looking at the Title II report data, I just want to make sure. So if I'm looking at 20 to 21, so that is for that academic year. Is that correct? So we had 20
Yes,
to
ma'am.
18, 1,824 were enrolled and 555 completed. So we're mostly through the pandemic at that point.
Yes, ma'am. You are correct.
So then the next year, then we saw a decline of completers of then 8, but we saw a more significant decline of those enrolled between that year to year, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And then one more thing, if it's okay, Mr. Chair, could you walk me through the comparison of completers over the 3 years, the year, this year, and the last year? One more
Yes,
time.
ma'am. So for 2021, there were 649 completers, and the prior year, there were 557 completers. So that was a change of 16% of an increase. So, and then 2021 to 2022, there were 555 completers, and there were 649 for the previous year. So that was a decrease of that 14%. And then 2022, 2023, that year of enrollment or completers was 547. So that was a 1% decrease.
Okay, thank you so much. What I'm just trying to do here, Mr. Chair, members of the board, is just wrap my head around maybe the impact of the couple of years of the pandemic and see, if that movement from the plus 16 to the negative 14, then to the negative 1.44% is a trend of improvement after the pandemic. If next year we can anticipate that that change over 1 year might be in the positive. So just trying to figure that out. Thanks so much, Michelle, for walking me through that. I appreciate it. Good
Yes,
work.
ma'am.
Questions from other board members?
Mr. Chair, Michelle, what page did you say the ABCTE information is on? I'm
I
scrolling.
do, that's fine. I do not have that in the report.
Oh, okay.
As we weren't able to get it through the Title II because the Title II reports the previous year. So this is the current information that we have gotten from ABCTE.
Okay. And will we have more information in your January report?
Yes, ABCTE will be providing information on their enrollment and then also on their completer and employer surveys and partnerships.
Thank you.
Dr. McLean?
Thanks so much. Just one other question on the ABCTE completers. Will we be tracking where they land upon licensure as well? Will we be tracking?
Yeah, so they will be doing that and they are doing that. I think that also is part of the data that they'll be bringing in January. So they are giving surveys. They met with Julie and the superintendent and I, and what they're including in that report. And part of it is looking at where the teachers are going. As Michelle said, 60 out of the 100 are utilizing that Class 5 provisional license, which means they're in a Montana classroom right now, teaching as they're working with ABCTE. So that's encouraging to know that they're staying in Montana. Obviously, if they're completing the program through Montana, the Montana way, the pathway and for American Board, they're utilizing it for Montana. That means that they are staying in Montana. They're doing it to be in Montana, because if they were doing it for a different state, they'd go through whatever that state's requirements are.
Go ahead.
So, Chair Tharp and Crystal, I'm looking at the Praxis scores on page 414, and I noticed that some of the schools are consistently have the percent passing lower than the national average. And I realize that Praxis is just one pathway, but is there support for the schools that are consistently below the national average passing percentage?
Excuse me, Board Member Schmidt. In terms of help or support, I think it's really what I talked through in my last presentation on, having that collective conversations with our EPPs. Is this the test we should be using? Why are the scores low? What could we be doing? Is it something within the EPP, or is it the test? And it's not for us to pinpoint that. It's really for the EPPs to see this data and say, what's going on? What should we do, or what can we do? I would say that a lot of the schools that have a lower score, there's not many tests being given. So if one or two don't pass, that plummets the percentage right there. And I think that really should be taken into consideration for some of the lower scores. But in terms of support, it's really working together. We utilize the Praxis Working Committee to see what's best for all of the schools and, and what tests that are being utilized. But like I think you've said, it is just one area, one way of showing content knowledge. So we do have others. It is up to the EPPs if they do utilize that Praxis, as it's not a state requirement at this point.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Crystal, if the board goes through the process to change from the big Praxis to the subtests, when would, and we moved on a, expeditious schedule, when would that go into effect? Is it July 1?
Board Member Quinlan, that's a good question. And I know Christy's there with you. We did talk with the deans of bringing them information to their next meeting. But then from there, we would have to form a panel to get the, to look over the tests, to get that cut score for Montana, get it to you as an information item, and then as an action item. I think July 1 would be probably a little difficult. I'm not saying impossible if we can add some meetings for the deans or, the Praxis Working Committee. But if it's something that the board would like and, us to try to, pursue further, and if it's what the recommendation is, I would be hopeful we could get it before the start of the fall, for EPPs in the fall, but that may be a little ambitious. Christy may tell me to slow down. I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you, Crystal.
Any other questions from the board? All right, well, thank you to Michelle and Crystal for that information. We look forward to continued follow-up on this topic.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, this time I'm going to turn the meeting over to our Accreditation Committee Chair, Madeline Quinlan, who has the next several items.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And our next item is action on variance to standards. And I'll turn it over to Ellery Bressler and Crystal Andrews.
Thank you, Chair Quinlan, Board Chair Tharp, and members of the board. My name is Ellery Bressler, that's B-R-E-S-L-E-R for the record, and I am an accreditation specialist at the Montana Office of Public Instruction. And with me is Crystal Andrews. Before you today are the 2024-2025 Variance to Standards requests, which I believe begin on page 417 of your packet. The Variance to Standard process is outlined in the Administrative Rules of Montana, Chapter 10, 55-604, which also describes the formation and duties of the Variance to Standard Review Board. That review board met via Zoom on November 6th and reviewed 11 initial Variance to Standard applications. It went well. Everybody was able to attend, as well as all of the applicants were able to attend as well and explain to the board what they were doing. They recommended all 11 of those to Superintendent Arntzen for approval. And then OPI reviewed the 5 renewal applications and recommended those to Superintendent Arntzen for approval as well. And now the superintendent is recommending the approval of those 11 recommended initials and 5 renewal applications, which is broken up into 2 separate action items. I'll begin speaking on the 11 initial first, and then I can go back and do the 5 renewals. Action 1, like I said, begins on page 417, and all initial requests are for 2 years. The first application is for the Corvallis K-12 schools. And this is for the main schools, Quentin Brown Primary, Corvallis High School, Edna Thomas, and the Corvallis 7-8. The application is to have a total of 3.0 total school counselor FTE for all of the Corvallis schools. The required school counselor FTE for the above 4 schools is 3.173. The workable reasons include they have additional counseling support from a school psychologist. Ravalli County has a significant deficit of credentialed school counselors. Again, this is an initial request for 2 years. The second application is for Corvallis as well. This is for their RISE charter and distance charter schools. This is for library and school counseling. For the library one, it is it requests to have the charter schools utilize the available library services of the main schools and not obtain additional FTE. The required library media specialist for the charters is 0.502 FTE. Workable reasons include the majority of these charter students are not on physical campus. For the counselor FTE, it's the similar request to utilize the on-campus services available. The required FTE for the counselor for the charter schools is 0.636. Again, workable reasons include they have additional support of the school psychologist. The majority of these students, they do not expect to come to the physical campus, and they have that available 3.0 counselor FTE. The third request is for East Helena for their 227 Academy charters, and this is for the library media specialist. The request is to have the charter schools utilize the main available library services at the main school and not attain additional FTE. The required library FTE for the charter schools is 0.002 FTE. Workable reasons between East Valley Middle School and East Helena High School, there's a total of 2.5 library media services, and they share the library services to maximize resources. The fourth application is for the Frenchtown K-12 schools. This is for the Bronc Fast Track, their charter school. This is for library media specialist FTE. The request is to have the charter school students utilize the available library services of the main school and not obtain additional FTE. The required library media services FTE for the charters is 0.001. The workable reasons are because the Bronc Fast Track is held within the Frenchtown High School, allowing students to have access to library support. The combined enrollment of the high school and the Bronc Fast Track is 412, which is well within the limits range of 1.0 library FTE. And they have that 1.0 on the main school. The fifth application is for the Lamont Elementary for Lamont 6-8. The request is to utilize the middle school model for music offerings only, which would take away the unit requirement of music offerings. Currently, they are underneath the junior high model. The workable reasons is they're still allowing the students to access music, but they are unable to hire a full-time person to do music for that half unit opportunity due to the lack of staff. They have the available music curriculum, classroom, and instruments. They just, again, are unable to fill that position. The sixth application is for Lockwood High School. This is for library media specialists. The request is to utilize 1.2 library media specialist FTE, while the requirement is 1.5. Workable reasons, library will be open during all class periods. The library media specialist will be required to meet with the professional learning committee's content teams, which allows for opportunities for collaboration. The seventh request is for Marion Elementary, Marion School, and Marion 7-8. This request is to not obtain FTE for the school counselor and instead utilize their paraprofessional on campus is what their workable reasons will be. The required school counselor FTE is 0.4. The workable reasons include that paraprofessional is currently pursuing her school counseling degree and is close to being able to apply for a license. And the students already have a longstanding relationship with the para. They were unable to fill the counseling position due to no applicants. The eighth application is for Missoula County Public Schools. This is for the Missoula Connect Academy, their charter school there. This is to utilize the available public library and book mobile in lieu of hiring a librarian. They need the required FTE is 0.002 for library. They have an MOU in place with the library to provide students weekly access to library books to check out. Students will still have online access to resources through Missoula County Public Schools. A similar request for the other charter in Missoula Teach, to be able to, in lieu of hiring that library media specialist, they will use the MOU and with Missoula Public Library and Book Mobile and a comprehensive online library in lieu of hiring a librarian. Again, they have weekly access to book checkouts. The required FTE for that charter school would be 0.001. The 10th application is for Thompson Falls Elementary School. This is for library and counselor. I'll speak about the library one first. The request is to utilize 1.0 library FTE to cover all 3 schools for library. The required FTE for library right now is 1.001. Workable reasons, the elementary and junior high schools are on the same campus, and there's a paraprofessional in the junior high library for part of the day. For counselor, it is to utilize 1.0 school counselor to cover all 3 of the schools. The workable reasons include they have additional support from a previous teacher who worked in special education, additional counseling support from Western Montana Mental Health and the Cabinet Mountain Cooperative, and they have additional support from the school psychologist. The required school counselor FTE for all three schools is 1.23 FTE. And the last initial request is for Three Forks Public Schools. This is for library media specialist FTE. The required library media specialist FTE for the middle school is 0.5 FTE and 1.0 for the high school. The workable reasons include all the schools are housed on one campus facility. With the campus, there are only 2 libraries, so they have 2.0 total, and they need to have 2.5 librarians. Both libraries are open during the day. They only have 2 libraries on campus. And again, that's an initial request for 2 years. I'll pause here. That was a lot. Please feel free to ask me questions, and I would be happy to answer them.
Are there any questions for Ellery? Board Member Schmidt?
Thank you, Board Member Quinlan. So
Just push them up.
down
No.
there. Can you hear me? Okay. So I understand why these schools are requesting variances, but frankly, I'm a little offended by Missoula County Public Schools with their charter schools implying that a librarian is good for checking out books, and that's it. Are they working toward finding a media specialist within the year? What's happening? Can you explain a little bit more about what's happening there?
Yeah, so they're using they have that MOU with the public library. The students would also have access to the Missoula County Public School Librarian. It's just not to have to obtain additional FTE and resources for 0.001 FTE.
Yeah, I see that. They didn't include that in their application. It's just, oh, they can just check out books. So thank you for adding that they'll still have access to a librarian. I appreciate that.
Other board member questions? Board Member Slinger? Oh, sorry. Oh, Board Member Rasmussen.
Thank you. Thank you. Is my memory faulty? And it could be, but is this fewer new applications than we usually have? I was thinking we had used to have in the range of 20 new applications a year. Am I losing my grip?
Thank you, Member Rasmussen, Board Chair Tharp, members of the board. This is more than we had last year. Last year we only had 5 initial. In prior years, it ranges. It just depends on the state of where we are with particularly finding those specialists. So,
okay.
Board Member Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Am I correct in assuming that we're going to see more, as it seems to me there's a large number of the charters that were approved in this list because of obviously trying to do a 0.001 of an FTE, right? Am I assuming that's something that we should sort of expect as these charters are starting up and getting on their feet?
Yeah, so Board Member Slinger, I would say yes. You know, as long as we have those ratios in there and rule, if it would only make sense for them to try and get a variance for such a low percentage. So I would say we will be seeing more as it goes on and as we get more charters, especially.
I have a follow-up question to that one. Yesterday, we toured the Bridger Charter School in Bozeman, and the kids are moving between the regular high school and the charter school. And I'm wondering if that's true for many of these other schools, so that you know, the enrollment is attributed to the charter school, but they easily have access to the rest of the school, especially when they're co-located.
Board
Any
member
thoughts on
Flynn,
that?
yeah, I would say, and maybe Executive Director Flynn could add onto it too, but I believe as we looked at the applications, it seemed as though that they did, move throughout. And when we had our variance meeting, like Ellery said, they all of them attended and sort of shared that was, it's either the same campus, the same school, they had access to the same, FTE, especially the library or, counselor. So I would say yes to that.
Thank you. Director Flynn?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually in Corvallis doing the public charter school visits when they were doing the variances to standards board meetings. So I was able to sit in with Corvallis and hear, some of their rationale. And I think it's exactly what Crystal just said. A lot of it is that these students, the school within a school model allows students to still have access to the same teachers, the same library, but those ratios may be skewed a little bit, especially when you're like Corvallis and you are bringing in a higher number of students who may be otherwise homeschooled before, but now are online. Corvallis is also utilizing some online library materials in order to support those students. It'd be similar to like their counseling. They just have to think of more creative ways to support those students who aren't in their buildings. And so that's really what this variance process is giving them. So you see a lot of library counselor because those are all ratios. I would also point out that the Lamont application is incredibly different than the ones that we typically see. Theirs was for a music teacher that doesn't necessarily have a ratio, but it does have a requirement for a half unit of music. And so they're thinking out of the box and how they can still provide those offerings, but not necessarily in the model that we have in our rules. And so I would actually hope that other districts are thinking about that, as they have some of those specialty teachers, whether it be health enhancement, what are we calling it now? Music, some of those other required sort of extracurriculars or electives that they may not be able to offer, but that they can get creative and do it in a different way. I would like to see more of those actually, but I think our charters are doing something incredibly unique as well and trying to figure out creative ways around the rules by offering additional opportunities.
Mr. Chair, I would suggest it would be interesting for a future board meeting to get some information about how schools can deliver library services online. I mean, to me, that's a novel concept, and it would be interesting to hear more about that.
And I agree, especially considering that how many library resources are online. I mean, the Dewey Decimal System and the card catalog and looking things up is not the way we do research anymore. And so that particular area has evolved so much in recent years that, you think about what students who have access to the Montana State Library, online media resources and all those different things, it only makes sense to have more opportunities to how to envision an online library.
And Madam Chair, I would also offer that we actually had this conversation with Missoula and around their Connect Academy. And I think it would be nice to maybe bring in some of the Missoula, Corvallis, those are two that come to mind, about how they are ensuring that there's still access for those students who are totally online and may not even be in Corvallis or in Missoula. So I'll add that to my list.
Other board members? Board member Schmidt? Oh, okay. Dr. McLean.
Thanks so much. This is a really great and insightful report. And so for McCall maybe, or for you maybe Ellery, or you maybe Crystal, do you anticipate that as the charter schools continue to roll out and as they continue to evolve, that perhaps in their second and third year of existence, that maybe this list of applications for the variance to standards might be more direct instruction related? I'm kind of surprised by what I see here, because I kind of thought with the innovation that I read in some of those applications that we might see maybe an immediate need for some more variance to standards that were instruction review.
Yeah,
Just
Madam
curious
Chair,
to see
Dr.
what you
McLean,
think.
actually, that's, I think, a really good point that I don't think either of us brought up initially. When we, one of the requirements in our applications for the charter schools is that they list out the variances that they may need. And one of the sort of different processes that the board has done is we've just included those variances in their contract. So if you go, I'm sure Crystal and Ellery have that at their fingertips if we ask them to look for it, but there were a number of variances that the board just blanketly approved from the charter schools that didn't go through this same process because it was in their charter application, and that we verified with them that those were the flexibilities that they needed without having to go through this process. They knew upfront that that's what they were going to need. Some of the schools that you see here, they didn't even consider that, like, oh my gosh, we have an online school. We're going to have to think about online library services. So that's one thing that too, I've really been trying to encourage the applicants, like include that in your application, because I think board members are interested in knowing, not just that you can do these things in the similar model, but we want to see those additional flexibilities as well to ensure that what they're trying to do through innovation, that we can give them the flexibility up front and that they don't have to go through this process later. I think it's also important to note that this process still exists. So if they don't realize or recognize that early on and they figure it out in the first couple months, that there's still this opportunity and flexibility for them.
So McCall, in terms of the timing, because the contracts are 5-year contracts? Does that mean the board approved a variance to standards for 5 years?
Madam Chair, I would expect so. Yes. And maybe that's something that, yeah, it is because it's the term of the contract, but these typically are on a shorter time frame. So I suppose they could also come to the board and ask for a revision to their contract, which we would negotiate with them. I think that's probably a longer conversation we need to have with OPI to make sure that we're not overstepping any of those processes.
Any other questions from board members? Seeing none, Ellery, should we go ahead and move on the initial variances and then you can pick up with the renewals?
Madam Chair, I think that's an excellent idea.
Mr. Chair, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Please proceed.
I move to approve the superintendent's recommendations on the initial applications for variance to standards.
You've heard the motion to approve these variances requests for the 11 schools. Is there a second?
Second.
Dr. Slinger with the second. Any further board discussion? I just put together some numbers on this. Out of the 16 total, including the next ones we're going to hear about, 13 concern FTE for library, 4 for counselor, 5 are coming from charters, and then the one unique one, which is, again, kind of refreshing to see a different approach because, like McCall just shared, I've been encouraging schools, if you can't fill, then come up with an alternative, and please, and this variance process has existed for a very long time. I wish more people would try to take advantage of it, especially when they're looking at accreditation deviations and how to come up with a creative way to address it. But I applaud the one for looking at a different way to address without music. So any other board member discussion? Any public comment? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of approving the initial applications for variances signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, motion carries. Back to you, Chair Quinlan, for the renewals.
And back to you, Ellery and Crystal, for the renewals.
Thank you, Chair Quinlan, Board Chair Tharp, and members of the board. The Action 2 renewal applications are for 3 years and begin, I believe, on page 896 of your packet. We have 5 renewals, and I'll just start talking again one by one. They are all for library. So the first one is for Bonner Elementary. The application request is to have 1.0 FTE for both the elementary and the 6-8. The required library media specialist FTE for both schools is 1.001. For the second is for Columbia Falls High School. The application is to have 1.0 library to cover as opposed to the 1.5 requirement. They do have a 1.0 paraprofessional library assistant in there. The third application is for Havre Public Schools for the high school. This application is requested to have 1.0 library FTE for the high school with paraprofessional support. The required FTE for Havre High School is 1.5. They often fall below that 500 point throughout the year. The fourth application is for Stevensville Public Schools for the 6-8 and the 7, or the K6 and the 7-8. The application request is to have 1.0 library FTE for both schools with 1.0 paraprofessional library assistants. The required FTE for both schools is 1.5. And the fifth renewal application is for Target Range Elementary for the elementary school in the 7-8. The application request is to have 1.0 library FTE for both schools with 0.5 FTE paraprofessional library support. The required FTE for both schools is 1.5. Again, these are renewal applications, so the renewal application is for 3 years, and I will turn it back to you.
Are there any questions from board members? Comments? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Chair, I'm ready to make a motion.
Okay.
I move to approve the superintendent's recommendations on the renewal applications for variance to standards.
You had a motion to approve the renewals. Is there a second? Seconded by Board Member Hammond. Any board discussion? Is there any public comment? See none, proceed to a vote. All those in favor of approving the renewal applications for variances signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Thank you, Ellery, for your work on this.
Thank you.
Item 24, Madam Chair.
Sorry. I'll turn it over to you, Crystal.
Thank you, Chair Tharp, Chair Quinlan, members of the board. For the last time, my name is Crystal Andrews, spelled Andrews. For the record,
Oh, it's not the last time.
last time today. I'm the Accreditation Licensure Senior Manager at the Office of Public Instruction. I will be brief. I am here to seek the board's approval of the 2023-24 corrective plans for the 23-24 annual Montana Accreditation Report. I believe most of your packet has been taken from my items today. I apologize, but the corrective plans received start on page 970 of your packet. We had 128 schools that required a corrective plan this year, which is outlined in the Administrative Rules of Montana, Chapter 1055-605. Corrective plans will be submitted as part of the accreditation process for this year, which is due on February 28th. Districts required to complete a plan will have to revise and resubmit within the new accreditation system. As a reminder, all schools that were in advice or deficiency status were required to submit a corrective plan. We received all 128 corrective plans that are before you today. And with that, I stand for any questions that the board may have.
Are there any questions from board members? Okay. No questions? Oh, sorry. Board Member Rasmussen.
Crystal, was there anything that you noticed that was common or more reoccurring? I didn't, when I read this, I didn't, have a tally sheet. Anything that you noticed that was more reoccurring than anything else? Or, just generally or specifically?
Sure. Board Member Rasmussen, I would say most of our corrective plans, and I didn't tally it either, but it's most, I can say that, are on the student performance section. So that is the area where districts will need to either submit, data to back what they're saying, or add some narrative to what was being said. What I can say is that when they are submitting their corrective plans, that we have worked with the think tank on revising those rubrics from last year so that they are more concise, more clear. Language has been removed, like I said, I guess it was 2 days ago now in my report, on what is being asked and expected. So hopefully that will help. But I would say that is predominantly the area that, we saw the most. I would say a second might be on the comprehensive needs assessment and setting the goals. But all in all, looking at the plans, it's just, providing more data, providing more evidence, explaining further, that type of thing. So for our first year, I think that it's there was a lot of similarities within what was expected. I'm hoping though, going forward, we have even less corrective plans and that our rubrics are much more clear or aligned with the standard that will help support, more better scores or, more evidence being submitted.
Thank you, Crystal, and thank you for the explanation or note that a lot of this is first year implementation of our new accreditation process. And so we'll look forward to helping this become more routine or at least understood.
Even with that, Chair Quinlan, if I may, there are a lot less corrective plans than years past. So it is still a positive trend that we're seeing, even being, a new implementation. So just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Any other questions from board members? If not, Mr. Chairman, I'm prepared to make a motion.
Go ahead.
I move to approve the corrective action plans for the 23-24 Montana Annual Accreditation Report.
Heard a motion to approve the corrective action plans. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Rasmussen. Further board discussion? In reading through these, I was happy to see a variety of measures being used to address the student performance. I saw a lot of schools saying they're going to be able to take a closer look at the MAST results. Saw schools saying that they're looking at the ASVAB, and glad to know that still is around. It's not obsolete anymore at all. So it's still a tool in the toolbox, especially for our smaller schools looking at multiple measures. So I appreciated that. So we got a motion and a second on the floor. Any further board member discussion? Is there any public comment? Okay, the motion is to approve the action on corrective plans for deficient in advice status accredited schools. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Crystal. Go ahead and take the rest of the day off.
Oh, okay. I hear that. Thank you.
Oh, Dr. Merkel, otherwise, so do what you gotta
No,
do. Thank you for your work.
Thank you. Thank you.
I just
everyone.
also wanted to second, thank you, Crystal. There's a whole lot of work that you and your staff went through to prepare for all these agenda items. And we appreciate the thoroughness of it and also your anticipation of our questions. So thank you.
It just means that I know you very well at this point. So it's a good thing, right? Thank you all. Have a great weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Okay, with that, we will stand in recess before we continue we've got our final push. We've got 4 items left after this, but we will stand in recess until 10 o'clock. That should give us about a 12-minute break. We'll call the meeting back to order. Meeting of the Montana Board of Public Education, as we will push through our final 4 agenda items here. We're now on item number 25, a resolution to encourage a third year of mathematics. And I'll turn things over to Executive Director Flynn.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Over the last several Board of Public Ed meetings, the board's really discussed this idea around mathematics attainment and proficiency, really trying to think through how we can support improving those assessment scores, and how we can assist our partners at OCHE and higher ed and really moving the needle on remediation. We've heard from our partners in higher ed that it's also a challenge for them, so trying to think through what that looks like from our seats. The resolution is on page 1004 of your agenda packet. I put this together in conjunction with folks at OPI and OCHE and really tried to think through how we can strike that balance of, the requests that we've gotten from OCHE, as well as understanding that there's a lot of steps that have to be taken from our partners at OPI to initiate the changes in administrative rule that are being requested. As you guys know, in order to add those graduation requirements, the Office of Public Instruction would have to initiate a negotiated rulemaking process, and then the board would have to go through MAPA. It is a lengthier process. It does take some time. So this resolution really states that the board's encouraging OPI and OCHE to work together to create some kind of collaborative process to identify some of those strategies that can increase math proficiency. We know that math proficiency is not only important to our secondary schools, but also for our youngest learners. We talked about that earlier in the week. And so trying to think through the steps that we can take in the right direction to really begin that research and information gathering to address the issues in a number of other ways. Mr. Chair, I'd turn it back to you and other board members. I know this is a conversation we've been having, so just want to see if there's any questions specifically on the resolution, but then also just talk to maybe the process and broader ideas that folks might have.
Thank you. And yeah, it's a real balancing act. I know we looked at this, and a lot of the schools already require the third year.
70%.
Was very exciting to hear when we were at Bridger Charter the other day, is that the students at Bridger Charter, now, even though they had access to a third year of math from Bozeman High, they wanted their own Algebra 2 to be being taught there in their own portion of the building. And so the kids want it. And we heard our own student member report that, the Montana Association of Student Councils passed a resolution that they supported this as well. The balancing act also that comes in, as McCall shared, the whole MAPA process that involved, and then quite honestly, also the economic impact statement that would go along with that. And for the schools that are offering just 2 years, or they only requiring the 2 years for graduation, there's some balancing issues there as far as what they can offer. And as Vice Chair Hedlund has reminded us, is that for some schools, that third year could be a barrier to graduation. And the absolute last thing that we want, while encouraging improvement, is to put up a barrier that would end up having some students facing potential dropout, and continually remembering Dr. Slinger's dissatisfaction with our math achievement scores. Obviously, as we all share, he's just much more vocal about it, and we appreciate that. And he has very, very good points. Yeah. And so it also then comes back, well, just adding a third year, that's not going to fix it. It's not enough. There needs to be more. And that's why I really like this. And when working with McCall and crafting this resolution there, I really like that last paragraph there about there needs to be more work, comprehensive strategies, increasing math proficiency, because it's more than just saying, okay, you have to take a third year, because what does that third year look like? Does because theoretically it could mean that you're watering down your curriculum and you're really not doing anything more rigorous. You're just spreading out material over 3 years instead of 2 years, or you're offering another lower level course that counts as a graduation requirement. So trying to find this balance while also recognizing the concern that we all have about it and how to increase these. And Dr. McLean, I believe that the regents are adopting a similar resolution. And then this afternoon, I will be presenting a similar resolution through the Board of Education as well. So Dr. McLean, would you like to speak to this?
Sure, Mr. Chair, members of the board. First of all, I'd like to begin with a great big thank you to this board for entertaining different versions of this conversation over this past year. We think that it has led to some great productivity around the math proficiency conversation. And I think it has elevated the importance of both the K-12 board and the post-secondary board, as well as both of those communities working together to get to a better place in regards to greater student math proficiency. So I think to this place, the conversation has already yielded a very positive result in that end, in the fact that both boards are talking about it today. The Board of Education is talking about it. Undoubtedly, education partners across the state have dialed into previous meetings. They'll be dialing in today, and they're hearing loud and clear the importance of making sure that high school students, when they earn their diploma, having those math proficiency levels so that they can achieve whatever their next steps might be. So I think already we've yielded some great results by just having the conversations that we've had. Second, I want to make sure that I express sincere appreciation to you, Mr. Chair, and to Executive Director Flynn for working with our team and working with our board, and also working with the governor's office to draft this resolution, to work with us on ours, and then to work with us on the Board of Education resolution. We really tried to make sure that everybody had an opportunity to weigh in, so that at the end of the day, this truly was a balanced resolution where we're calling on our K-12 schools to do all that they can to close some of these gaps that we are seeing when students come to us. And so I think, again, good partnerships coming together, sharing ideas. I think what we have before us today are some clear and logical steps. First, the urging or the encouragement of our K-12 partners out there who don't already require the third year to now do so. And then finally, the second piece of what we have here clearly outlines the importance of creating the collaborative process between us, the Office of Public Instruction, the Board of Regents, working with the governor's office and any other external partners to increase math proficiency in support of college and career attainment. And so we look forward to working with each of you to that end. On both pieces of this resolution. And I just want to close one more time by thanking all of you, thanking the Office of Public Instruction for the data that they have provided in this conversation, turning that around really quickly. We think that this is a real forward-thinking opportunity because we do recognize the challenges with opening up rule. We're headed into a legislative session, but we think that this will too, and to close the loop on my conversation, elevate to all of our K-12 partners across the state, the importance of thinking different about how we provide these math opportunities for our students all across Montana. So with that, Mr. Chair and members of the board, thank you so very much. We look forward to getting this moved forward and then seeing you folks this afternoon at the Board of Ed on it.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. And I want to thank McCall. I gave her the very, very basic framework on what I kind of envisioned this to look like, and she did a fabulous job working with the partners to wordsmith this and come up with this resolution. I know some people might say, well, it's not a requirement. Yeah, it is just a resolution, but it's powerful with everybody on the same page with this. And I recall, you know, we've all faced those concerns about cell phones in schools and the disruption and everything with that. And all it took was a letter from the governor out to all the schools. And we have school districts all over the state redoing their cell phone policies. And one letter that wasn't a requirement in a state that is as much conservative and local control as Montana, just that one letter nudged people along to do the right thing. And so I really believe that this can do the same thing. And with that, I would, yes.
I just wanted to ask if OPI had any comments they wanted to make.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to make comments. I just wanted to give you an opportunity.
Thank you, Board Chair. Thank you, Member Quinlan. Julie Mergel, Chief Program Officer at the Montana Office of Public Instruction. As a former math teacher, this is my bailiwick, so we care very much actually at the OPI as well as being a partner in this work. We've proposed already beginning to put together, a thoughtful task force to really bring all of our stakeholders together and get to work on what it means by these best practices. So we are here to serve and be a part of that work as a partner in that. So whatever we can do to encourage, as Dr. Slinger has said, right, multiple times, right? Like we have to look at these proficiency results and understand that in mathematics, that means doors are closing for students. And so that's really critical. We heard yesterday a student make a comment, make math harder earlier. I kind of appreciated that. I was like, that's a pretty good comment, right? So I think we've got a great opportunity when we think about even early numeracy. So we are here and stand ready to partner in whatever fashion or way and are in support of making math proficiency for all of our Montana students P20 better. So thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Board Member Asmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. Just thinking about all the changes that have come to schools in the last couple of years, a lot of it initiated by this board or put into rule by this board, and thinking about, the number of things that they have had to deal with. I'm really glad that although this is absolutely something that needs to happen, and all the small schools that I served in did require 3 years of math. I know that there's at least a few schools, some schools, that are going to have to get used to the idea and then figure out how they're going to accomplish it. And I really appreciate this little bit slower approach that allows districts to devise their own, way of addressing this, maybe even over several years until they can change or plan for that. I appreciate that. I think that is both encouraging, so they know the direction, but realistic, acknowledging the difficulties some schools may have to make this happen.
Yeah, very good. Very good point, Renee. Thank you. With that, does somebody have a motion?
A motion,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Chair.
Okay.
I move to approve the resolution to encourage a third year of mathematics and to support for mathematics attainment and proficiency.
I'll second that.
A motion and a second to approve this resolution. Any further board discussion? Is there any public comment? Seeing none, we'll proceed to a vote. All those in favor of approving this resolution as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Motion carries. Okay, thank you. All right, item 26, this is still accreditation. Go back to you, Chair Quinlan.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Marie Judish. Is she on? Okay. And we'll be reviewing the economic impact statement related to the math content standards.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marie Judish. That's Judash, and I'm the Senior Manager of Teaching and Learning for the Office of Public Instruction. Within your packet, starting out page 1007, I believe, you'll see the document prepared for the math standards revisions economic impact statement. I know you have seen a previous version of this, and with very little respondents, we've been eagerly pursuing our administrators in the state to help us give the feedback that we need so we can prepare this better for you all as well as for legislation. So I'm going to jump down to page 5 of my report. You'll see the page numbers within those, and I'm just going to do a high level on a certain components that would be a highlight for you. We were able to directly contact and have 81 different superintendents, teachers, principals, etc. complete the survey for us this time. So we have a much better picture of what the economic impact would be for the revisions of these mathematics standards. Looking at the tables on page 5, you'll see estimated curricular costs. I go into more detail down below, but you'll see based on a survey of what different schools have that just recently updated their curriculum and the costs associated with students, we created an estimate, probably on the lower end, to be honest with you, of what it would cost to replace all curricula based on the updates from the standards. And you'll see that number of $28,325,000. Again, that's per student, going over all, if every school in the state were to replace all of K-12 curricula. Looking at the K-8 level, you'll see the price tag of about $175 all the way up to $250. You'll see very different responses from different districts also. Our smaller schools might have a minimum cost. So this cost may very well be $1,000 per student, or the bigger packages would be a smaller price tag. Again, it's really hard to quantify an actual number because it doesn't determine the amount of resources they get, if it's a consumable that they need to renew every single year, if it is the technology that's integrated in there. So this is the best we could really estimate based on the feedback from our schools on what that curricular cost would be. We also on the same page have estimated costs for professional learning. Taking in the feedback from the districts through the survey tool. Professional learning, now while it has a price tag on here, can vary very much based on the quality of the professional development. So you'll see anywhere from $1,800 to $3,000 per day, and that could be if it's provided by the vendor themselves. Say you chose a curricular program and they provide specific professional development from that. And that's more on the use of the tool rather than having different professional development come in to actually sit in there and coach your teachers and have them deep dive into what that program has to offer. And that can range anywhere for 2 to 4 days. You'll see upward of $2.4 million for all of our schools to be able to get a minimum of 4 days of professional development on those components. I know I'm going quickly, so at any point, if you want me to slow down, please do not hesitate to do that. Continuing down, I did have a little table in there. I did not include the Board of Public Ed's fees. I know it's $60 per page was the latest I heard, but with this big package, it's going to be a heavy price tag on updating that with the Secretary of State for the Board of Public Ed. Our estimated costs right now are at $56,500 for the revisions that we've already done, with an allotment of $20,000 for professional learning. That's probably on the lower end as well, depending on how much we can actually get out into the field and contract with others to help us provide those. And that would also include guidance documents with our task force experts and different educators around the state. I'm going to jump down to the conclusion now. Most of those things are standard pieces that you would find in any economic impact statement that don't give much more to the illusion of what we're really dealing with these particular set of standards. We discussed already the different potential curriculum costs between $175 to $250 per student, and then professional learning as well. One thing that we were quite surprised by, and part of that is we know that the summary document is a 195-page document. So to ask districts out there to read all that, have time to reflect on that with their staff is quite challenging. So we did do some one-pagers and things as well to support their understanding of the standards. While many of the districts actually indicated they would need K-8 curricular materials, those standards have undergone less significant changes than the 9-12 standards. And so I'm sure once they dig in a little bit more, districts would find that there's potential to continue to use the current K-8 materials that they do have, while the 9-12 will definitely take a deeper look and really diving in to see if the curriculum they have will already work or if updates are needed. It is good to note that we did update the mathematical practices in these revisions as well. That will not match with what is in Common Core, which is what is commonly used in a lot of our vendors. However, it is also important that most of our curricula does not already meet our standards one-to-one, since we do have Indian education for all in all of our standards. And I've yet to see, I could be wrong, there might be one out there, but I've yet to see a math curricula that actually includes that within their textbooks. And that is a lot of extra work on our staff, our staff as well as our educators in the field to make sure that that is included in their instruction when teaching to the standards. A lot of feedback in making sure that we understood where the schools were coming from in terms of their staffing and having adequate staff that is fully prepared to teach the standards. And there's more details down below that outline that. And I wanted to pull that out actually by class level too, and I'll get there. But overall, the feedback was that they stand to elevate math proficiency, which we were just discussing very importantly, and that there is support needed for the fiscal components, staffing, and then the logistical demands of implementing new standards, the professional learning, the planning time, all those pieces. You'll see that anticipated costs, again, if this is a full renew for every district, because that's what they choose to do, would be upward of $30 million across the state. I'm not going to go over every single graph down below. I am working toward 9 of my portion of the packet. You'll see we did get really good responses from our superintendents. Again, thank you to Dr. Mergel, and to make sure that we got that in every inbox. And then I know Rob Watson sent it out once again from Sam. So we appreciate trying to get all that information. We had superintendents, principals, etc. You'll notice we have 8 AAs, and that's just because of dual roles. We had all but one of our AA schools respond, which was wonderful, in getting that feedback, because we know economically it's a bigger burden probably for them in some ways, not in all ways, because budgets are very different. And then also including our non-classed elementary schools to make sure that we were able to understand their perspectives. You'll see the difference in the different class sizes as well as grade bands as they responded to these. Continuing down, most of them across the board knew that there would be an economic impact of some sort. And that would be, of course, as we surveyed time, professional learning, or updating curricular costs. When we go to question 2 on page 11, you'll see a summary of by district, so AA, and continuing on the associated costs that would come with those standards. And we just thought it would be really interesting to see what the stories were from the AA level all the way down to the non-class and C levels. Specifically, you'll see more about coaching at our AA and A's and having that availability come in there. Utilizing substitutes, lack of staffing, even at the AA level for the interventions. Again, needing more professional development. AA superintendents view the changes as beneficial despite the cost, so seeing the advantages in taking on these revisions. A districts really notice that you'll see as a theme, which was not us prompting it in any way, that finding certified and confident math teachers in K-8 is still a challenge. Continuing that there is definitely time needed to update the standards with their year-long curriculum maps. Obviously, this would affect MAST as well, and making sure that they are reevaluating their schedules depending on how that works out with their curriculum adoptions, should they choose to do so. Again, continuing down, I did like that some notice that offering the science data or the data science in the math standards, particularly in the 912, that they would need some more professional learning and ensuring that their high school math teachers would have that background, which is not currently something that is required in the first 2 years of math. Continuing, you'll see more on the professional development and making sure that for their Class C schools, that they are retaining and finding those educators, some of them having many years between those educators. And then I don't want to continue to burden on that staffing potential. There's more details down below as well. On page 13, we did try to theme out what those different costs could be. Initial cost for students, ongoing and hidden costs, like I mentioned previously, if it's a renewal every year. Some books now, I know even my daughter's, she gets 2 books a year, that's a consumable. They don't have a textbook anymore, so they have to replace those consumables every single year. Professional development, and already the budget constraints that districts may be facing, and just uncertainty still of what would be specific estimates, because they haven't had the time to deep dive into those. I believe with that, you've read the report. I'd love to stand for any questions that you have, Chair Quinlan or board members, so that I can help you better understand the economic impact statement.
Are there any questions from board members? Maria, I have a couple of questions for you. You said that the majority of the impact of the new standards, the proposed standards, is at the high school level, and yet in the responses here, about $18 million is coming from the K-8 side of things. I guess, and I'm searching for it, or I have been looking as we go through the report, but I thought there was a question about, can you absorb costs? And I expect that there's some need for high school, but I'm wondering about the expense for K-8 and whether that can be absorbed in what schools have for curriculum replacement on whatever cycle they're using.
Thank you, Chair Quinlan. We saw the same thing. We're quite surprised, having sat through the revisions myself and gone through those. I think part of it is just not knowing what those true revisions would be at that grade level. And like I said, it was a huge document and we understand that. And some of them are, it should be known, some of them already have outdated curricular materials already. We heard of some that still haven't updated to the last round of revisions from 11 years ago. So while we signaled that the greater cost would be at the 9-12 level because that's where we had the greatest change in the actual content standards, so that the respondents did indicate that there was a need overall, not everyone, but potentially for all of K-8. There is a need in terms of the elementary in particular to crosswalk what was there and what wasn't. There wasn't a lot of removing so much as there was condensing. So taking standard 8 that has 6 substandards now is condensed, and those things move to guidance documents. A little bit of transitions in the early grades with time used to just live in second grade, and only second graders got to learn about time. Where that has transitioned and spread out so we can build up the developmental early numeracy skills on those components as well. Again, I can't, the hardest thing about this economic impact statement is I can't speak specifically for every district for what they currently have for their curriculum and their staffing and their professional development plan. And we can do our best to estimate that and what we think are the constraints. But I do see a greater impact when it comes to curricular materials at the 9-12 level. And I know Dr. Mergel sitting in the room as well, if she has anything to add on to that component.
Dr. Merkel, did you have anything you want to add on to that component? Okay. Board Member Hammond.
Yes,
We can't hear anything if something's being asked. I apologize.
I'm looking at the table, page 1020, with approximately $17 million in costs for K-5 and 6-8. Would you be compelled, based on this survey, when you do the fiscal note for the legislature, to use these figures?
Ooh, Chair Quinlan, Board Member Handman, that is probably a great question. I might direct toward Dr. Mergel.
Looking at her when I ask it.
Good.
Chair Member Hammond, I think that's a really important question because this report is actually the Board of Public Ed's report that will go to the Budget Education Committee and we'll be with them. In order for it to have a fiscal note, it would mean it would have to have some form of a bill to go with. And so I can't speak to necessarily, and maybe Director Flynn can, as to what a potential bill would be that a fiscal note would be attached to regarding these standards. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Mergel. Board Member Hammond, I actually looked up the new accreditation standard statute because I anticipated this question might come up. The new language actually says that the Board of Public Ed has to send this report, the economic impact statement, to the legislature prior to taking action. So I did send the economic impact statement along with the proposed revisions to the math standards to the Education Interim Budget Committee for their December 16th meeting. Like always, the Office of Public Instruction will present that economic impact statement and answer any questions on the proposed rules. The Education Interim Budget Committee's role in this is that they have to decide if the proposed cost or anticipated or estimated cost is substantial or not or insubstantial. So if they determine that it's substantial, the way that the law is written is that the Board of Public Education may not implement the standard until the following July 1 after the next regular legislative session, and shall request the superintendent in public instruction include a request in the superintendent's budget that the same legislature fund the implementation of the proposed standard. So it wouldn't be a fiscal note. Rather, we would be working with Section E to get that in the superintendent's budget. Obviously, it's not in there right now, so it would be a new proposal. But given that ed interim budget tends to have the same members as Section E, it won't be a surprise to them, and they would have to debate that in Section E during the session.
Follow-up. Please, McCall, have you had an informal hallway type feedback from legislators on this dollar amount?
Yeah, Board Member Hammond, that's a good question. I haven't specifically on this dollar amount, only because I haven't seen them since I sent it to them last week. But I do know that they've had conversations with myself and Dr. Mergel around what they really want that economic impact statement to look like. I do think that this sort of new version of the economic impact statement is more in line with what they expect to see. Not only, information from our school districts who oftentimes say not sure in response to questions, but also based on the expertise that folks at OPI and what they anticipate the cost might be for districts. So I do think that is going to be some of the changes that we'll see. I think Representative Beatty has some ideas of how that might need to look different in the future, so that it gives them a better idea when they then have to make the determination if it's a substantial or insubstantial cost.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair and McCall, I would expect that the legislature would think $30 million was substantial. And even if we were talking 11 million for 9/12, that it's still substantial. But it also seems like if we're in anywhere near that ballpark, that building a budget request is a lot more than walking in with this survey and conclusions, that there's a whole pretty much a math initiative that would need to be brought forward. So I guess I'd just point that out. It can happen early in the session, especially with a new state superintendent coming in. She has an opportunity to put together her own budget. But anyway, something we should think about, perhaps even convene maybe the accreditation committee, either probably after maybe this goes to the budget, the legislative budget committee, and see how we might want to proceed. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I think that makes sense. I would note that this specific statute changed this last session, so in 2023. So it's not been put to the test yet. So I do think that there'll be some nuances that we'll be sort of working out and trying to figure out what that actually looks like to the board to make that request to the superintendent. I could see in a situation where the superintendent says, no, thanks. And then, we're like stuck in no man's land. So there are some odd nuances with this that we just sort of, I think, need to work out together. I like the idea of having the accreditation committee, and I would, let Dr. Mergel certainly propose that to the Ed Interim Budget Committee, that we would work together in that way to come up with something should they decide that the cost was substantial.
Thank you. Oh, sorry. Board Member Rasmussen.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Maybe it's in here, but I didn't see it. The question you did ask, or you did refer to, could you absorb this cost? That question. But the question I didn't see answered anywhere in here was, what is the difference in this cost compared to what you spend currently? And obviously teacher would carry over and that would be the same. But I didn't see that difference, which would give the legislature and us a better idea of increased cost. Do you understand? Was that in here and I just missed it, or it's in there in pieces, or?
Chair Quinlan and Board Member Rasmussen, how the questions were phrased were, would they incur a cost beyond your current costs? And maybe it's not represented well in there, but I will make sure to dig into that data and find that. But that is how it was presented in the economic impact survey. Great question.
Thank you, Marie. I think that's a key piece for us to get a handle on. Any other questions, comments from board members? Did you want to take any public comment? It's an information item. Is there any public comment on this? Okay, seeing none, Mr. Chair, I think we're ready to move on to the next agenda item. So, thank you, Marie, for all the work on that and your presentation. So next, item 27 is action on and response to public comments submitted on revisions to the math content standards that went out for public comment over the last couple of months. My understanding is we didn't receive any comments, but I'll just ask Director Flynn if she wants to make any comments.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I was actually going to share a little bit about like next steps, but I think we just did that, so I won't belabor the point. But we did not receive any public comments. So this will go to the board for action in January. We'll know a little bit more then what the Education Interim Budget Committee decides, and we can certainly have those conversations at that time. Thanks.
Okay, Mr. Chair, it's my understanding no action is necessary then.
All right. All right, thank you, Chair Quinlan. Moving on, item number 28. I'd like to invite our friends from the University of Montana coming into enemy territory. Appreciate you making the trek over. Did you get to ride the bus or you have to drive separately? But I'd like to welcome to our esteemed panel of researchers from the University of Montana to come forward.
You should think of it as friendly fire.
Where'd Dr. McCaw go? Okay. Yeah, we'll just go ahead and stand in recess for a couple minutes and wait for him to come back. All right, we'll call the meeting back to order. We have one final agenda item for today. It's item number 28, information on 4-day school week research report. We have 4 members from the University of Montana here, and we also have Dr. Clausen from the OPI online as well. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Okay, that's good to know. I'm a former music teacher and microphones were not always my friend. So directions are very useful. So thank you for having us today. We are very happy to be here to present our phase 1 findings on the 4-day school week in Montana. And to start out with, I'll just give you a little bit of a background information, some bio from our team members, just so you have some context there. I'm Dr. Erica Allen, and I have served in Montana education for 28 years, and several of those were as a principal and as a superintendent. And I My distinction with this report is I was also a superintendent in a school district that utilized a 4-day school week. So I have a little bit of background there. And I have been a part of this department. This is my 3rd year I've had this privilege. On my right is Dr. McCaw, and Dr. McCaw has served in Montana education for 45 years, with 25 of those being in the Department of Educational Leadership, and the other 20 as a teacher and a principal in his school district. He has a distinction of, in 2020, he was awarded the, I'm going to read this to get it right, the William C. Shreve Endowed Chair for his research work. And to his right is Dr. Matt. And Dr. Matt has been serving in education in Montana and Oregon and Indiana? Illinois, the other I-state. Yeah. For 42 years, Dr. Matt was a superintendent of 3 different school districts before joining the Educational Leadership Department 17 years ago. And he has been the department chair. This is a testament to resilience. He's been department chair for 14 years. And Dr. Tong joins us. She joined our staff as a adjunct professor this last year. She's been a student in our department and adjuncting before that. She is a longtime professor and researcher. She has written and published multiple textbooks and multiple articles. She's a researcher through and through. So that is our team member. Dr. Lee is not with us. Most of you know Dr. Lee. He is our dean, a former superintendent of schools. So we're all very heavily invested in Montana education and have many years of background. So we're going today to discuss 5 areas of our report, and we are going to each take a different area. So I'm going to start out with finance. For the finance section of this report, we looked at, we looked at trustee data, financial data that was reported to OPI on an annual basis. Each school is required to report this data to OPI. And we looked at the collections from 2006 to 2023. For a little bit of context, most of you probably already know this, but I'm going to explain school accounting systems are organized and established on fund basis. So a fund.
Could I interject? Sorry, I don't think the
Yes.
PowerPoint is showing right now.
Is it not
Oh, it is now?
showing? Okay.
It is now. Okay.
It is now. Okay.
Sorry.
Good. And we're even on the right one. So what I've got in front of me is not necessarily what's up there. Okay. So school districts are established on, their accounting systems are established on a fund basis. And funds are a set of accounts that are used to track the fiscal activity for a specific purpose or activity in a school. Each fund must be accounted for separately so that its resources, its obligations, and revenue and expenditures are kept apart from other funds. And district clerks then issue payments for expenditures using codes that identify the purposes, the programs, the function, and other details of the transaction. So these transactions are then reflected in the trustee financial report where we've got our data. So we looked at 4 separate areas. We looked at instruction expenditures that were paid through the general fund, and the general fund is defined as the fund used to account for the financing of a district's operations costs that are not accounted for in another specific fund. And we also looked at instruction expenditures from all funds, and all funds would include general fund plus a tuition fund, miscellaneous program fund, and including Title I funds, the Federal Impact Aid Fund, and the Technology Fund. Additionally, we looked at maintenance expenditures per A and B paid through the general fund and also paid through all funds. And in this case, all funds would be the general fund and transportation fund, miscellaneous program funds, Federal Impact Aid funds, and building reserve funds. Additionally, we looked at student transportation costs by school districts paid for by the Transportation Fund. And finally, we looked at food service costs by school district extracted from this food service fund. This fund includes all expenditures for running a school's food services. So using this data, we totaled expenditures per A and B, so annual number belonging, which is number of students, were calculated for school districts utilizing a 4-day school week schedule. And up above you is the data, and I'm not sure it's easier for me to stand and point or just let you just look. You can see it okay? Okay, so In the general fund, per A and B, we found that schools that were utilizing the 4-day school week schedule had costs in general fund student instruction expenditures of 8.93% higher than schools in a 5-day school week. In all funds, 4-day school week expenditures were 11.31% higher than the 5-day school week. Looking at maintenance that was paid through the general fund, costs per A and B were 16.14% higher just in the general fund. In all funds, they were 15.71% higher. And in transportation, and this is student transportation paid for in the transportation fund, the costs were 13.91% higher in a 4-day school week. And for food services, this was where we found that there were the cost savings in the 4-day school week. They were lower, 33.4% lower, and probably because of that one less day to feed students. So this analysis overall demonstrated that school districts utilizing the 4-day school week schedule spend more per A and B basis than school districts utilizing the 5-day school week schedule for the years 2006 and 2023 in the areas of instruction, in maintenance, and transportation. And the only area that we found a cost savings was in the food services. One of the confounding variables that we discussed and looked at was the difference between large schools and small school differences. And due to the concept of the economy of scale, large schools should cost less per A and B. So we looked at just the small schools that are using the 4-day school week and the 5-day school week, and we compare those. We did not compare individually large schools because there is only one large school district that qualifies under those numbers that is using the 4-day school week. And we found the difference in not just the small school districts that the 4-day school week in the general fund instruction expenditures were 4.8% higher. Per A and B in all funds in the instruction, they were 6.52% higher. For maintenance in general funds, the 4-day school week was 9.1% higher. And for all funds, it was 7.4% higher. Transportation was even higher at I'm gonna need reading glasses here. 6.27% higher. And for food services, again, was lower, there was less of a difference, but it was lower at 11.69%. So, yes. Yeah,
Sorry to interrupt you,
You're
but
good.
it will help my understanding as you go through.
Okay.
I understand you said there was only one large district, but what's your cutoff between a large and a small district?
Yeah, that's a really good question. We looked at the classification of A and C, so up to 200 students and then up to 300. And so let me see, I've got it in here. Let me see if I can find that.
You had double A and A.
So
Which side
200
did the
is, yeah, 200 is Class C. Less than 500 is Class B. Class A would be less than 1,500, and above that would be double A.
Okay, and then your definition of a large district is double A and
above.
A.
Mhm.
Okay, A and
So
above.
there's only one A school at this time that was using a 4-day school week. Yeah, that's a great question. Okay, so we also looked at school districts 2 years before they transitioned to using this 4-day school week schedule and 2 weeks after. And we use that so that those 2 years so that we could bring in those first school districts. And we found that between the years 2006 and 2023, that in the for instruction in the general fund, that the school districts, once they transition to the 4-day school week, it costs them 6.94% more. And for all funds, it was 8.33% more. Once they transitioned, maintenance costs from the general fund were 9.8% higher and 8.43% higher out of all funds. For transportation, it was 8.43% higher. And, oh, excuse me, I'm messed that up. It was 2.3%. And for food services, it was 12.99% higher. We also looked at this, took into account inflation. And when adjusting for inflation on an A and B basis, maintenance and food services were both higher. Instruction, maintenance, and food services were higher, but transportation was slightly lower. So based on this data, school districts that transition to a 4-day school week could expect to spend an additional, then I'm going to start with small school districts, which are again 200 A and B and less, Class C. So in that, they would expect to spend $39,778 more once they transitioned. And this is with inflation. For a district with 500 or a Class B, 500 and less, the extra cost would be $99,445. For a school district with 1,500, so a Class A, the extra cost would be $298,000. So just to give you an idea. That's a brief overview, and we will take questions at the end. You can ask us all kinds of questions on these. So I will pass it down to Dr. Matt now to talk about student achievement.
Thank you. Chair Tharp, honorable board members, thank you for this opportunity. Oh, good, we're on the right slide. I'm going to be talking about achievement. And for this section, it's the largest section of our report. And in most research, you identify your population, and then you take a sample of that population. We were fortunate here that we didn't have to do that. Okay, we had everybody in the population, and we call that a census. So we had a census of the population. And what that boils down to is a little bit over 100 million data points dealing with just achievement. And sorting through all of that was an interesting experience. And we found a lot of interesting things in there, as you can see. We were looking for differences. So we were looking at the 5-day week students and the 4-day week students. And we knew who was where, and we knew what their scores were. So we were able to put them together. So what we were looking for was the percentage of those students in the 4-day week and in the 5-day week that were proficient or advanced. As you're aware, in MONTCAS and SBAC, students score either a 1, which is basic, or novice, depending if it's SBAC or MONTCAS. And then they are nearing proficient. And then when they hit 3, they're proficient, 4, they're advanced. And we were looking at the percentage that was proficient and advanced. And again, as I pointed out last time we were here, that's the same methodology that Dr. Tharp used in his study. So as you can see from the next, I'll go one more slide, please. Right there. Okay, the reading achievement. You can see the gap between the 3rd grade that were on the 4-day school week, 3rd grade that were on the 5-day school week. Same with the 4th grade, 5th grade, and it's pretty universal. It runs anywhere from 10 to about 15% difference. And that's, again, not their score percentage, but the percent that are proficient or advanced in each district. That followed through for math, which is your next slide. Very similar achievement, but again, universal, where over the years 2008 through 2023, the students in the 4-day school week did not perform as well on the achievement scores as those in the 5-day week. Now, these school districts that are on the 4-day week were largely small school districts, as Dr. Allen said. There was one that was a Class A district in 2023. All the rest were B or C. There's kind of a misnomer that smaller schools maybe don't perform as well, and that's a function in this. Well, we've tested that as we're working on phase 2, and that is absolutely not the case. We have identified, again, using a census of the data, that about less than 1% of the predictability of their achievement scores can be tied to the school size. So small schools do perform as well as large schools. So that's not a factor in this data. We go on, the next slide, I want to use that slide, thank you. We broke it down then, rather than by grade level, we looked at it by year. So starting back in 2008, you can see there was a small gap between the 4-day week and the 5-day week students. And you can see the gap grew and then kind of remained consistent in both reading and math. Now you notice there's some years missing there. When we transitioned from Montcast to SBAC, there was 2 years of data that were not collected. And that was because of the transition to SBAC. Also, if you look, 2020 is missing. Everybody was at home that year. Okay, there was no school going on. Well, there was, but it was remote and there was no testing going on. The thing that remains universal here is the gap. Okay, over the years, it's not just by grade level the gap is there, but over the years, the gap is there between 4-day week and 5-day week students. Now, the next slide, if we could skip this one, and I want to come back to it, please. Okay, so we're on to the one that says cohorts on top. Yeah, all right. We looked at this as cohorts as well. And a cohort we defined as a group of schools that started the 4-day week the same year. And the one that I have up there, I could put 14 of them up there for you, but it just bury you in data. The first one there is the 2008 cohort, which was our first one. And these schools started in 2008 and remained on the 4-day school week for the duration. Now, there were some schools or some cohorts, and there's 14 cohorts, there were some of them where some of the schools didn't stay on it for the whole time. And we dropped out their data when they dropped out. Some of them also closed. There were some of the smaller districts that closed in the middle. So their data just stopped in the middle. If you look at the 2008 cohort, this kind of mirrors the trend of most of them. And this is our longest one. And if you look at the math scores, you see something that appeared quite regularly for us, and that's a little bump right at the beginning. Okay, a lot of schools, when they first transitioned to the 4-day school week, improved their scores. Okay, some of that is carryover probably from the 5-day, and some of it is probably related to the fact that, well, we just went on the 4-day, we know we have to do well. That's only anecdotal. We don't have data to back that, but it's pretty standard that that occurred in a lot of the districts. So the cohorts, you can look at the data in the report. There's a steady downward trend in most of them. Again, this was data or an approach that we borrowed from Dr. Tharp, as he did the same thing and found very similar data to what we found. If we could go back to the previous slide now, please. So the next question for us was, okay, we know what happens with the proficient and advanced students. But what happens specifically with the basic/novice, the lowest end students, and the highest ones, the advanced students? So we looked at the cohorts, the same exact cohorts this way, and you can see this was a pretty standard trend. Okay, at the beginning, the basic and novice students are less, and the advanced students are more. Now, again, that's not universal for all of them, but that's pretty much the trend. But as they stay in the cohort, when they stay in the 4-day week, the basic and number of basic and novice students increases pretty substantially, and the number of advanced students decreases pretty substantially. And as you can see in the first one, a lot of times those lines cross. Going on to the next one, which is ACT scores. So this data runs from 2013 through 2023. That's when we started collecting ACTs along with the transition to SBAC. So these would be 11th graders. And you can see the difference there. The gray is the 5-day school week students, and the yellow is the 4-day school week students. Now it looks like, wow, they're pretty close. But remember that these are not percentages. These are ACT scores. So a point on the ACT scores is quite a bit. 2 points is even more. And if you look at the next slide, we looked at the ACT scores based on the time a student was in the 4-day week. So students in our sample, well, in our population, that took the ACTs during their first year in the 4-day school week. You can see their scores on the far left side there. They range from about 18.4 up to 21. Okay, when you look at those lines, you add the years, by the time you get to your 12th year in the 4-day school week, you've got about a 2.8 point difference in scores, which on the ACTs, that's pretty substantial. For many students, that's you get into college or you don't, or the college you want to. So overall, we found the data discouraging. Okay, I looked at, as a superintendent many years ago, in fact, in 2002, I looked at going to a 4-day school week. I was in a school district where money was really going to be tight. It was not here in Montana, because in 2002, you couldn't go to 4-day school week in Montana. But I calculated that we could have saved $372,000 by going to the 4-day school week, which when I look at our data in Montana, that didn't happen here. But our biggest fear was the achievement. What would happen to the achievement? And $272,000 for me at that point would have been 6 teaching positions that I could have saved. But we chose not to do it. And we chose not to because of the undetermined variable on achievement. And also our classified union didn't like it, but besides that. What you have here is not a prediction, but it's based on what did happen over the last 16 years. Okay, the data, it's unequivocal what happened. This isn't to say what will happen if somebody goes to a 4-day week. It's not to say what will happen down the road with schools going to a 4-day week, but it's information that I think is important. I thank you for the time. I'll pass it off to Dr. McCall.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, Board, Bill McCaw, University of Montana. I'll be talking to you about our research question number 3. The number 3 is appropriate. I'm used to lecturing in 3-hour blocks, and my colleagues have given me 3 minutes. The 3 is also important because I'm predicting Grizzlies by 3. Right. I want to, before we get to the actual data, I want to clarify now some terms that I'm going to be using with a little bit different definition. And the first one is a cohort. Right? So Montana determines graduation rate by cohort. Right? And for graduation rate, cohort is defined by those students who started in grade 9, right? And then complete in 4 years and graduate. So that's the cohort that I'll be talking about. Graduation, you've discussed before we arrived, I think, some graduation issues, right? So there's variability in the data for graduation because it requires 20 units, of which the state currently is requiring 13 units. It's up to the districts to determine those other 7 units, right? And when I was teaching in the high school for 10 years, there was always that freshman English class that 3/4 of the students were seniors, right? And getting them through. So there's some variability in the data. That variability I like to refer to as the reason why social science research is not rocket science. It's harder. And it's harder because we can't isolate the variables. So as we look at these graduation rates, I want to talk about some of the variability and questions that these numbers are causing us to contemplate. Our data is from 2011 to 2023. And prior to this slide in your report, right, you'll see we began by looking at the overall graduation rate between those districts utilizing a 5-day school week and those districts utilizing a 4-day school week. And what we found is that the 5-day had a 0.5% higher graduation rate, right? So the next question that we asked ourselves is, well, what about looking at the 4-day, 5-day school weeks at disadvantaged, right? Or free and reduced lunch is how we access that data. And that's the table that you're looking at in front of you on the screens. Here, we see that for non-economically disadvantaged, there's about a 2% advantage for the 4-day school week. And when we look at economically disadvantaged, we're looking at about a 5% increase in a greater rate, right? Now, it's important when you look at these percentages that we're not averaging percentages, right? We're using actual raw data that we have. So it's pretty exact in what we're coming up with here. So this led us to examine in phase 2, right? So we're in the midst of phase 2 right now, but we were thinking, well, you know, maybe this is a function of school size and not school week schedule, right? So here's those confounding variables. So in phase 2, no one has seen this yet, but we've completed this analysis. In phase 2, we looked at large districts versus small districts. Now, in this calculation, large district is greater than 500 and small district is less than 500. So we're trying to expand that band a little bit. And really what we saw in this calculation is that in small schools, right, the graduation rate was higher, right? About almost 4% higher in small schools, right? But then when we took a look at 5-day versus 4-day, the 5-day outperformed by about 0.5% again. And for me, what this highlights is that any advantage a small school has in regard to graduation rate is lost on the 4-day schedule. Okay? So more questions for us to delve into and see what the data may yield. I'll now turn it over to my colleague, Dr. Tong, and question 4.
Good morning, Chair Tharp, and board members. My name is Li Qintang, and it goes by Shirley because it's really hard for my colleagues to pronounce my name. And it's great. I had English name since I was in college. That is Shirley. So it's easy to call my name. Well, so research question number 4 was designed to examine the difference in students' attendance between 4-day school week and 5-day school week. The data of all Montana school districts from the year of 2013 to the year of 2023 were analyzed. Oh, sorry. So the data analysis included a calculation of the students, the total days present, and the students enrolled for just in both 4-day school week and 5-day school week. And also the data, these methods was preferred over using district-wide attendance percentages based on due to the varying sizes of the districts. So the category analyzed here includes 3 groups, okay? And the first one, that's all students attendance, and then followed by special education students attendance. So the last one is the homeless students attendance. So let's have a look at that figure. Thank you so much. So for the first category, that's all students attendance rates in 5-day school week were slightly higher than those of 4-day school week. The second category, that's the special ed students attendance in 5-day school week were also slightly higher than those of 4-day school week. Then the last category, that is homeless students attendance rates in 5-day school week were still slightly higher than those of 4-day school week. So in a word, students attendance in 5-day school week were slightly higher than those of 4-day school week based on 3 categories we listed there. So one of the reasons asserted for transitioning to 4-day school week was to improve students' attendance. However, in reality, it did not happen. So one confounding variable was the attendance during COVID-19. And therefore, we removed all the attendance data just in the pandemic years of 2020 and 2021. Then the research results remained the same. So, well, what about students' behavior? I would like to turn it over to Dr. Erica Allen.
Microphones. Thank you, Dr. Lucine Tong. I just wanted to prove we can say her name. She's great. So we looked at student behavior, and that was a little more difficult to find data on. So we chose to look at the annual report. At the end of every year, each school district is required to report their behavior incidents that resulted in expulsions or suspensions. And then we also looked at the student youth risk behavior, which is a self-reported biannual report. So I'll start first with the school district's report of student behavior. Looking at them, we found that looking at that data, we found that incidents resulting in expulsion and suspensions were very similar in both school district schedules. Where we did find a slight difference was in suspensions of out of school without services, and there were less suspensions in the 4-day school week schedule than there were in the 5-day school week. That could be attributed to one less day to get into trouble. It could be attributed to administrators just saying, you know, you're going to be gone tomorrow anyway, so we'll only give you 1 day off. We're not sure what that is, but there was a difference there. Looking at the youth risk behavior data, we looked at the 3 different categories. We looked at fights in school, and we looked at the alcohol use, and we looked at the marijuana use. And again, this is self-reported, and not all districts participate in this every other year. So looking at that data, as far as fights in school, the 4-day school week does have 19.01% less fights in school. Maybe we get more fights on a Friday, I don't know. Looking at alcohol use, the 5-day school week has 2.31% less reported alcohol use. And when we looked at marijuana use, the 5-day school week has 4.28% less reported use. And again, this is student reported, this is their perception, so we'll take that a little bit with a grain of salt. So that was our findings on behavior. I think now we are going to move to a panel discussion, and I believe that Dr. Clausen is going to facilitate that. And we would be remiss to end with this without thanking Dr. Clausen. He has spent substantial amount of time getting us this data. We looked at over 180 million cells of data. Plus, in the second phase, we're looking at additional data, so he is still finding data for us. So we want to publicly thank Dr. Clausen for all that work.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate this. I'm going to share my screen so that I can get the slides from the panel discussion. 1 second. Okay, my name is Robin Clausen, and it's spelled Clausen, and I work for the Statewide Longitudinal Data System Unit at the OPI. And it is one of my pleasures for the research activities that we do is to provide other researchers data for their own research projects. And it's satisfying to know that this is number one, it's public data. And as long as it's FERPA compliant, it is public data. And researchers really, especially contractors like the U of M, really should have complete access to the data set to the best extent possible. So I'm going to ask the panel a couple questions, and just for the panel, I did add in a question to the mix. But I'll start off by asking the first question, which is, in conducting this research, what was surprising?
Thank you, Robin. And I think we will address that question, and each of us will answer that separately. And I can start with that answer. As I said earlier on, I was a superintendent of a 4-day school week schedule school, and I was surprised by a lot of this data. I will say, if you had asked me when I was a superintendent how our school was doing, I would have said we were doing fine, and I probably still say that. Our achievement data was up there. We had a good school and lots of good things. What I did not do is look at longitudinal data. And I think most superintendents, and I'm maybe painting this with a broad stroke, but look at data from year to year, maybe like at 3 years, but they don't look at that long data because that's more difficult. This was very surprising, especially in the finances. Achievement didn't surprise me as much, but I probably still would have argued that we were doing just fine. The finances really did, the financials part really did surprise me. I would never have guessed that it costs more in a 4-day school week. The food services, not a surprise. 1 day less is going to cost less, but that was my biggest surprise. Dr. McCall?
For me, the surprise was looking at the achievement gap in 3 through 8 at Montcass. And so Dr. Matt showed you those lines, right? And so we have a gap, and what our research is not able to do is why. Why is that gap? So for me, the first thing that jumped out was that, well, it's the instrument. So there's something with the Montcass system and that the assessment that's causing this, right? But then we have the SBAC. And while the scores dropped overall as a result of that assessment, the trend in the gap stayed. And so it eliminates that variable that this is about an instrument. It's not. It's about achievement. That was really surprising and kind of exciting for me to see that, because we're starting now to really isolate cause. Even though it's not cause and effect, we're isolating.
For me, the biggest surprise was the finance. Like I indicated earlier, in a school district in a different state, I calculated we'd save $372,000. And I fully expected to see savings when we ran these numbers. And we had financial trustees reports dating all the way back to 2006. So from the very first day of the 4-day school weeks. So I was quite surprised by that. I wasn't surprised by the food service one, but maintenance I certainly was. I was definitely surprised by transportation. Now you're not running the buses as much. I was not surprised, however, by the achievement. What Dr. Tharp found 14 years ago was, it wasn't 14, yeah, it was 10 years ago now, was, felt like 14 to me, sorry. 10 years ago, the trend held and is still going on. And we travel all over the state, meeting with our interns that are new superintendents all over the place. And they're trying to figure out that when they're in a 4-day school week, what to do with it. And how do we deal with this achievement issue? Because they're struggling with their achievement. And, the other areas, I was kind of surprised by attendance. Because I expected a lot of people, when they went to the 4-day week, said, well, it will improve our attendance. It's one less day to be absent. It didn't. I thought it would. So.
For me, I think I have a lot of things that surprised me, and especially the food service. I mean, only the food service just costs less in 4-day school week. And, the rest of them just cost more in 4-day school week. And also the, achievements and 4-day school week achievements underperform the 5-day school week achievements. But there's a trend, a lot of schools, or more and more schools want to go to 4-day school week. So this is a little bit of worries about me. Yeah, thank you.
I might point out in China, they have 6-day school weeks. So
yeah,
this was
that's quite different. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like the thing that was said about the difference between the two tests and how you rule that out just by the persistence of the gap between the Montcass and the SBAC. That must have been incredibly enlightening to find that happen. So I'm going to go on to our next question. It's about the staggered rollout of these schools for example, some schools started in 2008 or earlier, and other schools started much later in 2023. So how do you account for the staggered rollout of these schools, and how long did it take you to see the impact of this change in schedule?
I'll take that one since I played with the achievement. So we handled the staggered rollout with the cohorts. So each year when cohort began, we tracked those schools for the extent of the time in the 4-day school week. So we had 14 cohorts. There was no cohort that started in 2014. Okay, nobody transitioned that year. In 2018, there was one school district that did. So you're not going to see a cohort reported for 2018 because nowhere in here did we want to identify an individual school district. And that was a very small school district that had like 12 students. So it was really not appropriate to put them in there. But the trend that we saw, as I indicated earlier, really was that initial bump where when they first start in the 4-day school week, they go up just a little bit, usually in math, sometimes in reading. Some of them just begin to descent immediately. Now, there are some that stayed fairly steady for a while before dropping. But the staggered rollout was pretty simple to deal with, quite honestly. Taking the cohort approach worked.
And when do you think you might see an impact of the 4-day model? Would it take a year? Would it take 6 months? Would it take longer?
Well, that depends on the school district, and each district was different. For a cohort, like I said, the impact came a couple years down the road. And I'm a little worried about the word impact because now we're saying that it's the 4-day week that caused this. All we're saying is on the 4-day week, this is what happened. Okay, and on the 4-day week, the scores did go down. Now, there may have been other factors in these cohorts, but it's universal in the cohorts that led to this decline. I would suspect in most districts, the transition to the 4-day week, you would see an initial increase, though, because we call it the Hawthorne effect. You're being studied. You know you're under the gun. If you want to keep this 4-day week, you got to do better. And that doesn't always last. And I've had superintendents that I work directly with that have told me that that's what they've experienced.
Could you guys also speak to your survey findings regarding teacher professional development and planning?
Yes, thank you, Robin. That was, we wanted to know how schools were using that 5th day. And what we found out, there's a big variety of ways that schools are using. And so there was no one set way. Some are using schools that 5th day to bring students in for remediation or for acceleration to help them out to grow and progress. Some are using it for teacher development. Some are using it as an like not an after-school program, but the continuation of that after-school program. But there really was not a lot of consistency. Another thing to note too is not every school has the same 4-day school week schedule. Not all of them go Monday through Thursday and then have Friday off. Some of them, one of the ones most surprising, had the first half of the year that they were a 5-day school week, and then the second half of it, they were a 4-day school week. So there are a lot of variations out there. People are trying hard to make this work. And I'm going to go back just a little bit further for our first question. This all changed, the rollout changed in, I believe it was 2005 when the legislature made the change from 180-day requirement to hours. And so with the hours changed, schools are able to make, a different schedule. And that schedule does look different. And that's important to note also.
What challenges did you encounter in this research, and what future direction do you see for your future research?
Did we mention 158 million data points?
Yeah, it's quite a few.
And I'm going to say this we really enjoyed we really did enjoy this research and analyzing this data. And one of the challenges is we would sit and discuss, because we all do have a background in schools and administration. One question led to another, and I think there could be an unending amount of questions, and I'm sure you have a lot of them, and a lot of them that were not able to answer. Dr. Mergel has asked us to work on phase 2, and we're working on that, and that's bringing up more questions. One of the things we really want to look at, and we weren't able to fine tune how we were going to do that in the first research, was teacher retention. And that's going to be, and recruitment. Let me get that second part is important too, because that's a lot of the reasons that people are moving to the 4-day school week. And we're looking forward to putting those pieces. We've already begun that work, and Robin's already providing us information. So go ahead, Dr. McLeod.
You can't overemphasize the importance of having the census, right? Because when you're sampling, then there's always this possibility of sampling error. And could we have gotten a stronger sample, a more representative sample? Census, we have it. So that was really powerful to see. As Dr. Allen said, as we would arrive at some sort of conclusion on the data, it asks more questions. And that's why when you look at the report and the achievement, it kind of goes on and on and on. And we would look at something, discuss it, and then say, yeah, but what about? And then went the next phase of inquiry. And that's why you see all those different ways of looking at cohorts, and looking at befores and afters. And we think that we've pretty well peeled that onion down to the core. Now we're starting to look at what's the data telling us and going even deeper in phase 2.
And also,
could you outline phase 2 a little bit for the audience, just so they're familiar with which immediate next step you're going to do?
Certainly. We're breaking down the data that we have by gender and ethnicity now. Okay, and that was at the request of the Office of Public Instruction. And we're diving a lot deeper into the question of retention and recruitment. And we're finding some really interesting things. Now, we've only had the recruitment data. I think Robin got it to us about a week ago. But we're finding some really interesting trends in there that would say that the schools that are moving to the 4-day week that are doing it for recruitment are finding success in recruitment. Okay, it's not conclusive yet. And again, this is another 3 million data points, but there's evidence of it there that we will share in our second one. And we're also looking at each of these things deeper. Okay, what are the factors in this achievement? Is race a factor in it? Is gender a factor in it? Length of time in the 4-day week. So we're going deeper.
That's great. So to follow up, go ahead.
Currently, we are investigating 12 research questions, and I'm advocating for a 13th. But we'll talk about that on the way back to Missoula.
He likes that number 3.
Well, if everybody could please say the important takeaways from the study and what it means. Well, I think you've almost already done this about what it means to your background as an educator. But what would you say that this comments onto the 4-day model as well?
And I can start there. I guess, as I said before, my important takeaway is really look at your data and look at that longitudinal, look at over time. And I know these are very complicated decisions for administrators and for school boards and for communities. They're very impactful. Take the time to look at this. Right now, we're in a little bit of a crisis mode with teachers, and I understand that. Our students talk about it a lot in class, and that's problematic. But this may or may not, the 4-day school week schedule may or may not be the answer to that, but look at the data carefully and take the time to make these decisions carefully, is my biggest.
Being perfectly honest, I'm frightened. It's a trend I think we have to be concerned about. I understand the recruitment issues. I understand, the need to have a teacher in the classroom. It doesn't matter how many days you're in the kids go to school if they don't have a teacher, and you've got to have them. I understand all that. But I worry about students in the future. I'm glad my kids right now are grown. Because when you take away, for many of them, up to 20% of the curriculum, that compounds itself. When we looked at those ACT scores, it played the way I thought it would. Because if you're not in school as often, and you think about it, and Tim and I have talked about this, Chair Tharp and I have talked about this years ago, that if you're teaching math and you're teaching 4 lessons a week instead of 5, now you can't really cram 1 1/4 lessons in each day. So in reality, in most cases, you're losing about 20% of the curriculum. And that's in 1st grade. Then you do it again in 2nd grade. Then by the time you get to 12th grade, your ACT scores are down by 2.8 points. So I think as a state, we need to be concerned about this. I think there's remedies that could happen for it. I think we need to address it. That's mine.
I think the other thing that's really important is that the data never answers why, right? And those are the conversations that need to take place. There's not a school leader, a school board, or a teacher in the state that says, you know what? Let's spend more money and have less achievement, right? So they did that for positive reasons, and the data is not supporting it. So as Dr. Ellen said, we have got to get schools to look at longitudinal data, right? It's a credit to the state that you've collected this data, and then we had access to it, right? And it's really quite deep in the type of data. So I think that we have to assist schools as they try to now manage their way through these, and I'm going to be selective in my wording here, these data-informed decisions versus driven, because sometimes you have to understand the data.
So for me, I think I really hope before schools decide to transfer to 4-day school week, so carefully evaluate their own data. And also just based on their own data, make a careful, cautious decision. Thank you.
Yeah, I really like this study because it really puts a lot into question. And I'll have to say that actually the researchers were very efficient. I got them a lot of data back in June, and they were able to process this into a report over a period of a couple of months. And I guess that is probably the benefits of working in a team, and probably a team that has worked together in the past, that U of M was able to come up with such rich questions to address this complex data. But with that, I'll hand this back to Chair Tharp regarding the study, and asking the audience if there's any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Clausen. Board members. Board Member Schmidt.
Thank you. I just have a quick question. In your literature review, did you look for studies that are similar in other states or nationwide? And what did you find?
We did look for others, and they're starting to be a growing body. It's still small. Most of the research we found, in fact, we were the only one who had the census. And I think, as Dr. McCaw pointed out, that was important. But there are other studies being out there, and I think it's becoming more of a topic of interest. What did we find? It's a mixed bag, to be perfectly honest. I think there was researchers that say, one thing and one that, so I didn't really find anything definitive. And that may be because we had the census data. So we'll be looking at that further. But I don't have a really strong answer one way or the other for you with that. I'm sorry.
Probably the strongest studies there were some sampling studies out of Oregon, one out of Colorado. This guy by the name of Thompson, I believe, is out of University of Oregon. And those studies were inconclusive. Okay, is the 4-day week better? Some say yes, some say no. Achievement-wise, same thing. But again, they were sampling.
Yeah, the research results just are mixed. Yeah, so that's the key thing we just found. It's hard to say, oh, in this math achievements, I mean, the 4-day school week probably is higher than the 5-day school week, but in other studies, in the 5-day school week, just was much more higher than 4-day school week. So that's mixed research results, but they are all sampled study. Ours, the only one, census. Yeah. Thank you.
There's also a different interpretation if you're writing an article or if you're informing policy, right? And we've shown that there's some really small percentage differences. And so it'd be easy in an article to say those are inconclusive unless your son or daughter's in that 3%. Now they're not graduating. Or they're in the percent that's dropped ACT scores by 2.8, right? And if we're going to focus on educating all children, then we got to look at all numbers. So I think that's one of the inconclusiveness that we're seeing across the country in studies. And sometimes they're in a single district.
Board Member Schmidt, I can tell you that in my own literature review, I disregarded a lot of those because of sample bias, because of just what Dr. McCaw just said. They were such small samples and so tight that it didn't provide anything conclusive that I felt. Board Member Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I was listening, and this was really great, really great. But you were right, whoever said the whys were not answered. You know, I was around when a lot of schools chose to move to a 4-day school week, and some of those in the Mass region where I was. And so one of the things that concerned me was, you know, in the middle of the summer, they decide to go to the 4-day school week that fall, or, you know, maybe in the spring with very little prep time. And so, you know, I'm wondering about the professional development that has been done or necessary or not done or whatever to help teachers adjust to a 4-day school week. Because obviously you have 4 days to get in 5 days worth of lessons. So how, you know, where's the professional development to help teachers learn how to do that efficiently and well? And I'm wondering if there's any data points that you can pull in to begin to address that.
Thank you, Member Rasmussen. In phase 2, one of the things we're considering is looking at some case studies. So we're trying to identify school districts that have performed better than other school districts in the 4-day school week and find out what's going on there. Spend some time in the schools, or actually we might send graduate students to spend time in the schools, and explore their training, their procedures and processes. And we haven't totally outlined that yet. We're still sorting that out, and we're trying to identify those districts.
Dr. Slinger had a question.
So, Dr. McCauley, you mentioned the, and you said, oh, and the 2%, and if your child's in that, or when they're not graduating. My problem is they are graduating. 95% of them are graduating, 93% are graduating, and they're not proficient. And how are you not, how are we at 30% proficiency in math and this, but we're graduating at 95%. Okay, and then this is just my rant, but to that point, I'm incredibly troubled by that. Okay, and so to that point, when I first saw this report come out, which I commend you so much for this work. This work is so important. I attended a local mass meeting, and I shared. I was like, wow, you know, the results are not good, and this and that. So not one of the superintendents on a 4-day week was surprised. In fact, every single one of them told me, well, we knew that. We knew that was going to happen. And I was so disheartened when I left that meeting, because to me, they knew these were the consequences of this decision as far as the detriment to achievement for the student, but they still went down that pathway. And so my question to you is, what is your plan as far as presenting to the school board association, presenting to superintendents to evangelicize this data finding as far as to try and at least make sure that the people that actually are voting to do this change, okay, the school board, local school boards, are fully informed on this, because I was absolutely shocked to a person. The superintendents all looked at me like, yeah, we know.
I think one of the challenges in all of this, and this is again anecdotal after talking to countless superintendents across the state and working with them as interns and that, while the decision to go there may not have always been theirs, how to get out of it, those that really want to get out of it don't know how to get out of it. And I faced that. That was part of the decision that I faced out in Oregon. When we started talking about a 4-day school week, the very next day, the president of the teachers union was in my office saying, we'll sign an MOU today, agreeing to this. That same president, 5 years down the road, if I said, we're not doing this anymore, would have been back in my office saying, okay, if we're working 4 days, now we have to work 5. So that's a 25% increase. There wouldn't, and that's what superintendents are running into. How do you move out of this? Some of these districts, you look at the transportation costs, a lot of the districts, and again, I don't have the evidence of this, just having spoken to these people, they jack the salaries of the bus drivers. You can't lose your bus drivers. You jack the contracts for the contracted services because you have to keep your contract. Okay, now you're spending more on 4 days. How do you go to 5? So that's the challenge.
I'm hesitant to go out and present just bad news unless I have a possible solution, right? And so one of the things that we're looking at and in conversations with the Office of Public Instruction is selecting some districts on a certain criteria and work with those districts to create a guide or template to say, this is what you need to do to look at your data. This is how you get that data. This is what you do with that data, and almost pilot it with these 5 schools or the cases to say, okay, what would be the problem if we said, get your data this way, right? And so that we can then make them aware of the problem and then say, here's what is one step for you to start to analyze your specific district. So that will be coming.
Board Member Quinlan.
Dr. Matt, you talked a little bit about possibility of going into the schools and collecting some survey data. And I'd be very interested to see what message we're sending students to go from a 5-day week to a 4-day week. I'm sure they think it's very cool for a while, but there's also, why isn't it important that they be in school 5 days a week? And so that student voice piece, I think, is very important.
Yeah, thank you. And I had the honor of serving as the superintendent in Hamilton when Victor, the first school district in the state, went to the 4-day school week. And Victor is 10 miles up the road. We had 8 students that left Hamilton to go to Victor because they wanted the 4-day school week. We had 12 students that came from Victor to Hamilton because they didn't want the 4-day school week. And actually it was probably parents didn't want them in the 4-day school week, but reality, it was a little bit of a trade there. So yeah, it's a very good point, and that's certainly part of the question.
Vice Chair Hedlund.
Thank you. I just wanted to mention, I'm really interested, as we talked about before, in those outliers of performance, as well as how the 5th day is being used, and if that's a factor, if they're providing that intervention and enrichment and counseling services on that 5th day, if that is supported by the data that are doing well. And then with attendance, I just am interested in those calculations because on Fridays, I know that a lot of the schools went to 4-day school week because a lot of the athletics are on Fridays, but those aren't counted then as an absence because the student is still participating in school activities. So that's just something that I thought of. And then yeah, I think that the costs were really interesting. Like maintenance definitely stood out to me. And I think that was it. Yeah, I'm really interested to see, what is happening in those schools that are performing well. And then just one comment back to member Dr. Slinger. I think that the parents are a factor that we really need to consider, because I know a lot of the schools that have moved to a 4-day school week did surveys, and the community was largely in favor of going to a 4-day school week. So that can be a driving force, and the superintendents don't get a vote on those items. So thank you.
You're absolutely right on that, Member Hedlund. We know superintendents who were against it in the District 1 anyway. We also have an intern that fought diligently to keep the 4-day school week out of her district and was successful at it. So, yeah, it's a big factor. Thank you.
Board Member Rasmussen, did you have your hand up again or still?
No, again, please, thank you.
Go ahead.
Two things I'm interested in is I really am interested in not only recruitment, but retention as well. I'm really interested in that data because I know some of the reasons that school districts did that is they thought they could pull teachers from, maybe areas around that had larger pools of teachers, but wouldn't come for a 5 and maybe would come for a 4. I'd like to know about the retention of those and the commitment of those and that kind of thing. And I'm also interested in when you do a 4-day school week, the days are so much longer. And I'm really interested to see if there's any way to measure the actual learning in a traditional linked classroom versus someone who really does well, a classroom that's longer than that, block scheduling. I think that block scheduling would work, to add to those data points as well as the 4-day length. But I'm really interested in that. Do students learn as well when they're when that is when that time is when they're having to go to school from 8 to 4:30 or 7:30 to 3:15 or whatever it is, as they did in a regular schedule as well. I don't know how you're going to get data for that. Thank you.
We're pretty certain Robin can find that for us.
Well, this is definitely not the last we're going to hear of this. I'm having a flashback to a little over 10 years ago where I was one sitting in front of a panel of 5 answering all the questions. And one of the final things that you put in any doctoral dissertation is implications for future research. I had no idea that it would have ever still been at this point with all of this. And I want to thank the OPI and Robin. And my original research was just I think it was the 06 to 13 Montcast scores. And that was quite a heavy lift for a computer at that time to process all of those data points. And I got nothing compared to what Robin is pumping out to you guys now. And so I want to thank everybody for this. And I want to thank all of the esteemed panel for all of your continued work. And like you said, John, it's scary. A change needs to happen. So.
Chair
Dr.
Thorpe,
Allen.
if we can just really quickly, we've thanked Robin and we might very much appreciate Robin, but I think we need to thank Dr. Mergel too, that is being very, very foresighted in asking us to do this study and then seeing a need to continue on with that. And she's done a lot of work and guidance with that also.
I know the new superintendent fairly well too, and so I think I can encourage that to continue with her leadership as well.
Funny? Yeah.
All right, thank you to the panel.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
All right, board members, is this page 1057 of your packet? Is it the 1057 of your packet? You see future agenda items. So you see at our January meeting, we'll have an exiting board member. We'll have a Macy update, reviewing some community choice annual reports. We'll get a report on ABCTE. We'll have more work with our charters, and you can see our other things that we have there, as well as reflecting. It will have to take action on superintendent contract for MSDB as well as his performance evaluation. So lots of work continuing there. Also, at our next board meeting, are going to have to undergo a slight reorganization as we will be electing a new vice chair, and then we will have to take a look at where we are with incoming members and look at some reassignment of some subcommittee chairmanships. But at this time, I want to recognize our outgoing vice chair. As I shared Wednesday when we started, it has been a deep honor and a pleasure to work with Susie as a friend and a colleague for all of these years, and the exciting new role that she is about to go on. The only negative I see is that she's leaving us, and I've really valued her participation on this board, and so we have a token for her.
Thank you so much. You guys have been incredible to work with. I've learned from you all, and I am just always amazed by the staff and the team and everything you think of all of the time, and just all the reach out. And thank you all. It's been incredible to work with you. And I love pottery, so this means the world to me, and I'm very grateful to have local art, and I appreciate you guys very much. And it's been an honor to be on the board, and I appreciate everyone's diligent work through these thousands of pages. Renee just digs in deep, and everybody does, and I appreciate everyone that served in as chair and then just taking the leadership roles in charter schools and on all of the committees. And thank you for your grace as I am still superintendent, and so giving me a little grace with that as well. And it's been an honor, and thank you for always being here, Dr. McLean. Appreciate you all.
This time I'd like to open up for any public comment. Board Member Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Susie, Vice Chair Hedlund, I just want to say best wishes as you move forward. By the amount of work that you bite off all the time, being a full-time superintendent and serving on this board, plus the other things that you do running for office, I just really believe that your commitment and your work ethic and your belief in public schools and what they can do will serve you well in your next job. I think they're going to get a great leader who is willing to really tackle the things that need to be done. And I wish you all the best. I sure have appreciated the chance to work with you.
Thank you so much, Renee. And I missed this end of the table. I want to say thank you for all the laughs, Dr. Slinger. And it's been nice to get to know Lisa as well. Thank you.
And Mr. Chair.
Dr. McLean.
Vice Chair Hedlund, on behalf of all of us at the Montana University System, congratulations on your new post. And thank you for your strong partnership with us in looking ahead to think about how we can innovate to best meet student needs. And thank you so much. You were not here for the math resolution conversation, for your leadership in making the resolutions happen today at this board level, at the regental level, and then about an hour from now at the Board of Education level. It just speaks to your thorough understanding of what students need to be successful and to thrive, not only in the K-12 institutions, but also when they leave them. And we look so forward to working with you as you take these next steps and move into the Office of Public Instruction. And then finally, just on a personal note, I want to thank you for always just being so doggone kind as you approached your work. We look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Dr. McLean. I appreciate that. And I have appreciated our partnership as well. I remember just, however many meetings back it was, and I mentioned that the urgency for PE teachers. And then the next thing, we were approving a PE teacher program. And so it's very exciting. Appreciate working with you.
All right, well, that brings us to the conclusion of our agenda. We are done with this part. However, we must proceed up to the campus what time does the Board of Education meeting start?
Mr. Chair, the board meeting starts at 1, but there is a lunch that you should be attending with the Board of Regents starting in about 5 minutes.
Okay, well, with that, we're not in, yes, we are adjourning. We are adjourned because then the governor's office will convene the Board of Education meeting. So with that, we will stand adjourned and we have a special meeting